Chapter 5387. The incomparably huge medicinal power erupted in an instant. Lin Yi gently placed his hands on her back and was about to guide the medicinal power for her. However, with a bang, Duan Muyu's clothes suddenly exploded. Looking at the beautiful body that was suddenly exposed in front of him, Lin Yi's first reaction was to be dumbfounded, and then he couldn't help but smile bitterly. "I've gone too far," hearing the somewhat awkward voice coming from behind. Duan Muyu's body couldn't help but tighten. After all, she was a woman. If it weren't for the fact that she couldn't be distracted at this time, she would have already crawled into a hole in the ground. No matter how much of a tomboy she was, no matter how close she was to Lin Yi, a girl's pure body, being seen cleanly by Lin Yi, with his hands on her back as well. This situation was simply... Her face was so red that it seemed like it was dripping blood, but Duan Muyu finally forced herself to calm down. Although she was ashamed, she couldn't regret it now. She could only risk it and continue to break through to the gold core stage. Otherwise, the incomparably majestic medicinal power in her body would instantly drown her. At that time, not to mention her pure body, she would even lose her life. At this time, Lin Yi was quite embarrassed. He really didn't mean it. He knew that the medicinal power of 2 supreme-grade gold cores would be very strong, and he was prepared to guide it in this regard. Logically speaking, such an embarrassing accident shouldn't happen. However, the problem was that he suddenly found that the meridians in Duan Muyu's body absorbed the medicinal power at a speed that was almost 10 times faster than ordinary people. This was like pouring water into a bucket. Although the amount of water was the same in the end, the original intention was to use a small ladle to scoop in, but he didn't expect that it would suddenly become a large bucket of water to be lifted up and poured directly into it. This was completely unexpected. The legendary leaf vein. Lin Yi mumbled thoughtfully. The so-called leaf vein was just a legend, and everyone's meridians were the same. Even if there were some special people, their meridians were more or less the same. As for this so-called leaf vein, it wasn't something that Lin Yi was familiar with. As for this so-called leaf vein, in terms of the structure of the meridians alone, there was no difference from ordinary people. Otherwise, he would have discovered it when he treated Duan Muyu last time. The structure was the same, but under certain special circumstances, the ability it displayed was completely different. For example, a normal meridian needed some time to absorb such a large amount of medicinal power, but for a leaf meridian, it was done in the blink of an eye. In the blink of an eye, all the medicinal energy was squeezed into the meridians of Duan Muyu's body, which was why such a charming yet awkward scene had occurred. The powerful medicinal energy instantly burst out from every pore of his meridians, and his clothes were naturally torn apart. Lin Yi could be said to be unprepared for this, but fortunately, he was now a real profound ascending stage primordial spirit, even if the strength of the primordial spirit body was not enough. However, with his method of guiding the medicinal effects in the other party's body, it was more than enough. At most, the other party would be caught off guard. By the time the other party reacted, he would be able to easily control the situation. Time passed bit by bit. With Lin Yi's assistance, Duan Muyu's absorption of the medicinal efficacy was very smooth. By the time the medicinal efficacy was completely digested, it was already 3 days later. Duan Muyu suddenly opened her eyes, and a brand new aura slowly released from her body. There was a sincere smile on her face. The effect of 2 top-grade golden cores was really not in vain. In 3 days, it helped her successfully break through to the golden core stage. The key was not the early golden core stage. It was the peak of the early golden core stage. This surprise was a little unexpected, but it was also reasonable. After all, whether it was her talent or heritage, she was by no means a mediocre person. It was not an exaggeration to say that she was a genius. Since she ate 2 top-grade golden cores at once, it was not surprising that she had advanced 2 levels in a row. Congratulations! Lin Yi's voice sounded behind her. Duan Muyu was about to respond, but when she looked down, she suddenly remembered that she was still naked. Her face suddenly turned red, but before she could do anything, Lin Yi behind her had already handed over half of the divine knowledge grass. Strike while the iron is hot. Eat it. Oh, Duan Muyu subconsciously took it and hesitated for a moment. But she forgot the embarrassment of not wearing clothes. You're not thinking of handing it over, are you? Lin Yi asked curiously. That's not it, but Duan Muyu was not an indecisive person, but this matter was indeed of great importance to her. Now the entire sect's higher-ups were forcing her to hand over this half of the divine knowledge grass. Although she had put on an attitude of refusing to cooperate, if she ate the divine knowledge grass just like that, there would be no room for negotiation. Once they fell out, it would be equivalent to betraying the sect. With her feelings for Yi Ling's sect, of course, she did not want to go to such an irreparable point. You're now a golden core stage master, so it's natural for you to eat the divine knowledge grass. No one can say anything about it. Besides, I'm here, no matter what happens, I can always support you. You won't lose control. Lin Yi's tone was very firm, and there was a sense of condescension. He was not targeting Duan Muyu, but the entire Yi Ling sect, ever since he recovered his primordial spirit to the profound ascension stage, and was able to kill a nascent soul stage old monster with one move of the soul-hooking hand. This feeling naturally appeared. After all, for the entire ancient small Jianghu, he was originally an existence that stood above the rules. Then, okay, Duan Muyu finally nodded. Being submissive was not her style. Otherwise, things would not have come to this point today. Since the divine knowledge grass was hers, what was the harm in eating it? As she spoke, Duan Muyu took the divine knowledge grass and stuffed it directly into her mouth. Then her whole body stiffened again. There was no longer the embarrassment of not wearing clothes in her mind. Only 2 words were left in her mind. Great pain, great pain. The indescribable pain surged like a tide, instantly engulfing her whole body. At this time, everything was not important. Strength and skills were not important. The only thing that could support her was her willpower. Because of her willpower, she was like a reef in the monstrous waves of pain. Time seemed to be extraordinarily long at this time. I'm a little reckless. A trace of regret suddenly appeared in Duan Muyu's consciousness. After holding on for a long time, she found that she could not hold on any longer. Chapter 53, 88. In short, Duan Muyu's opening method was wrong, so the current situation was basically the same as when her clothes exploded before. If it was someone else, even if it was a master of the Yuaning stage, Duan Muyu would definitely die at this moment. Fortunately, there was a profound ascending stage, primordial spirit, sitting behind her. In the small Jianghu of the ancient times, this was almost the existence of a master of the spiritual awareness. More importantly, this guy knew the entire refining process of the spiritual awareness grass. After all, since he came to the small ancient world, Lin Yi had to take a bite of the spiritual awareness grass almost every day to assist in his cultivation. In the first month, he still felt unbearable pain, but by now he had basically become accustomed to it. He was probably the first weirdo in history to eat the spiritual awareness grass as a daily snack. Pain was pain, but in his eyes, this thing was similar to coffee. Apart from the pain, it was quite fragrant and refreshing. Lin Yi unsurprisingly took over the turbulent and spectacular tide of pain for Duan Muyu, but he did not directly erase it for her. That way, there would be no effect of refining the spiritual awareness. He just suppressed it to a certain extent rhythmically, and then released it little by little. In this way, it was within the range of Duan Muyu's tolerance, and at the same time, it could maximize the effect of refining the spiritual awareness. In this way, another day and night passed, and Duan Muyu struggled out of the endless sea of pain. It was just one day. This time was far from long for others, and it was not worth mentioning for cultivators who had been in seclusion for decades. But if they were in Duan Muyu's situation, it would definitely be extremely long, because this was really like a year. The amazing perseverance that Duan Muyu showed on this day, even Lin Yi couldn't help but be surprised. Although he had suppressed the tide of pain, the total amount of half of the spiritual awareness grass was still there. Even if it was released in a controlled manner, the degree of pain was still far above the usual. After all, Duan Mu, you had only used one day to deal with the pain that others would need at least half a month to endure. She was able to do it without a sound, and Lin Yi couldn't help but give her a thumbs up. Young lady, you really are a man. Phew, like a marathon that had finally come to the finish line. Duan Mu, you let out a long sigh of relief. At this time, her entire body had been soaked in sweat countless times, and her image had been completely thrown to the back of her mind. Her tense spirit, for the whole day, relaxed a little, and her whole body fell back. Lin Yi was stunned. Duan Mu Yu was too tired to care about his image, but he was not tired at all. Especially in the past few days, he had been openly admiring Duan Mu Yu's clean and beautiful back. It was inevitable that some charming thoughts would arise in his heart, but he had been very good at restraining himself. But now, Duan Mu Yu suddenly fell backward and directly crashed into his arms. Lin Yi didn't even have a chance to react. He then stared blankly at the beautiful scenery in front of him. Previously, he could only see his back, but now he could even see his front clearly. Pink. This thought flashed across Lin Yi's mind, and then he met Duan Mu Yu's eyes. Ah, Duan Mu Yu finally came to her senses at this moment. She quickly covered her chest and sat up again. She hurriedly tried to find clothes to cover her embarrassment. Unfortunately, the clothes on the ground had already been torn to pieces, and this place was the confinement room, not her boudoir. Naturally, there would be no clothes to change into. For a moment, she was like a headless fly and didn't know what to do. Lin Yi was also very embarrassed. It was fine if Duan Mu Yu didn't move. He couldn't see too much. At most, he could only see her back. Now that she moved, it was even more beautiful, and he didn't know where to put his eyes. This kind of charming awkwardness didn't last long because Lin Yi suddenly reminded, "Hurry up and hide. Someone is coming outside." Duan Mu Yu was stunned for a moment. This room was shrouded by the black water array. Logically speaking, it was impossible for anyone trapped in it to perceive the situation outside, because divine sense couldn't explore at all. But based on the absolute trust established before, she subconsciously reacted and hid on the bed and covered herself tightly with the quilt. In fact, she should have done this when she was helpless just now, but for some reason, she actually froze. Thinking about it, it was very strange. Sure enough, as soon as Duan Mu Yu hid under the quilt, the iron door was opened, and the person who came was still Chiu Ming-chong. Chiu Ming-chong stood at the door and was about to speak, but when he glanced at it, he was stunned. From his angle, although he couldn't see every corner of the room, he could still see it clearly. He clearly saw that Duan Mu Yu was actually on the bed at this moment. A man and a woman were sharing a room. Although Lin Yi was still sitting on the side, Duan Mu Yu actually ran to the bed. Anyone could imagine what had happened, not to mention a guy with a rich imagination like Chiu Ming-chong. Here's the chance. Chiu Ming-chong's heart skipped a beat, but he didn't insist on this matter. This time, he didn't come to watch the show. Bing Wuching will be here soon. Before that, I would like to give you a word of advice. I hope you can weigh what you should and shouldn't say. Again, as long as you can help Bing Wuching hand over the God Knowledge Grass, you will be an honored guest of our Yi Ling sect. Everything will be negotiable, Chiao Mingchong reminded. Sure, Linny agreed readily. A wise man submits to circumstances. Then, we'll see your performance next. Chiao Mingchong was very satisfied with Lin Yi's attitude. He had no enmity with Lin Yi in the past, and the only thing he wanted was the God Knowledge Grass. As long as Lin Yi was sensible enough to help him trick the God Knowledge Grass from Bing Wuching, he had no intention of continuing to make things difficult for him. Chiao Mingchong left, but before he left, he deliberately glanced at the bed. Although he still couldn't see anything, his gaze was meaningful. That guy's eyes are strange. Don't tell me he's taken a fancy to you? Lin Yi turned to Duan Muyu on the bed and said, Huh. Duan Muyu was stunned. Then she shook her head with a strange expression and said, That can't be. I don't have any private contact with him. And a while ago, the higher-ups were discussing what? Lin Yi saw her hesitant expression and couldn't help but feel a little strange. This girl had always been forthright and rarely hesitated. Chapter 53:89. Yes, as many as you want here. Only then did Lin Yi remember that there was still a pile of women's clothes in his jade pendant space. He had already given a set to Duan Muyu during the primeval trial last time. He was distracted just now and did not remember this. After taking the clothes from Lin Yi, Duan Muyu did not get out of the quilt. Instead, she looked at Lin Yi with a strange expression and said, Didn't do it on purpose, did you? Of course not. You're thinking too much. Lin Yi suddenly sweated, although Duan Muyu's appearance was indeed quite pleasing to the eye. He really did not think of this. Is that so? Duan Muyu was skeptical, but there was no unhappy expression on her face. After putting on the clothes quickly, she immediately returned to her usual elegant and neat manner. It seemed that she did not take the previous embarrassment to heart at all. Of course, how can an honest person like me do such a wretched thing? After all, we've gone through life and death together. It's not like you don't know this. Lin Yi's words were justified, but looking at Duan Muyu, who looked like a new urban white-collar worker, he could not help but think of her naked appearance, and he felt a little guilty. Forget it. Seeing that you've given me so many supreme-grade gold cores, I'll just look at them. It's nothing anyway. Duan Muyu once again showed her forthright side. Lin Yi was speechless. After coming out of the confinement room, Chiao Mingchong did not lead the way for Bing Wuching, who was waiting in the reception room. Instead, he went straight to the God Leaf Hall. This was the most core and authoritative place in the entire Yi Ling sect. It was where the sect leader and a group of high-level elders gathered, and all orders were issued from. At this time, the sect leader Yi Qingcheng and other high-level elders were all present. When they saw Chiao Mingchong register and enter, they all showed some anticipation. Did you get the Divine Consciousness Grass? Master, not yet. Chiao Mingchong respectfully performed a disciple's salute. Although Duan Muyu had surpassed him, his position in the sect was not low. However, his position in the sect was not low. After all, he was the personal disciple of the sect master, Yi Qingcheng. Then why don't you hurry over and keep an eye on him? Yi Qingcheng frowned. The spiritual awareness grass was an absolutely fatal temptation for any gold core stage master. Even if he was already the head of a sect, even if he was only one step away from the Yuanying stage, he still coveted it. If there was no chance at all, then it was fine. Now that it was within his reach, he couldn't help but feel a little anxious. The other high-level elders were also urging him on. If they could get their hands on the God Knowledge Grass from Duan Muyu and Bing Wuching this time, Yi Qingcheng would definitely get the lion's share, but they would definitely get a share as well. If they couldn't get the meat, they should at least get some soup. Yes. However, this disciple just discovered something and felt that it was necessary to report it to Master and the elders. Chiu Mingchong said, "What could be more important than the divine sense grass?" Yi Qingcheng and the other elders frowned. "When I went to talk to Lin Yi just now, I found eldest senior sister hiding under the blanket, and there were pieces of her clothes all over the floor. It seems like she went too far." Chiu Mingchong said with ulterior motives. Outrageous! The group of high-level elders immediately started cursing when they heard this. As the eldest senior sister of the sect, how can she be so shameless and openly have an affair with a man from another sect in the restricted area? Where is the image of our Yiling sect? What a scandal! Yi Qingcheng was even more enraged. Anyone with a discerning eye could see that he was trying to make a fuss. This was not surprising because although Duanmu Yu was recognized as the eldest senior sister of the sect, she was not his disciple. There was nothing he could do about it. Who asked Chiu Mingchong to not live up to expectations, letting Duanmu Yu take the position of the eldest senior sister of the sect was somewhat embarrassing for the sect master, Yi Qingcheng. He could not show it on the surface, but he still bore a grudge in his heart. Otherwise, he would not have listened to Chiu Mingchong's slanderous words and strongly advocated for Duanmu Yu to hand over the spiritual awareness grass. If this matter really spread out, it would be very embarrassing, but he did not care. It was a good opportunity to suppress Duanmu Yu. Now, Duanmu Yu actually had an affair with an outsider. That was even more terrible, and it would ruin the sect's reputation. Directly removing her status as the eldest senior sister was already a light punishment. This was exactly what Chiu Mingchong wanted. He deliberately said this at this juncture in order to make Yi Qingcheng and the other high-level elders remove Duanmu Yu from the position of the eldest senior sister. This way, he would naturally be able to become the eldest senior brother of the sect. His strength at the Peak Late Foundation establishment was a little weaker, but he was still the personal disciple of the sect master, Yi Qingcheng. Moreover, there were not many disciples in the Yiling sect to begin with. Apart from Duanmu Yu, no one could be above him, so it was only natural for him to be promoted. Everyone was filled with righteous indignation. Chiu Mingchong thought that his master would definitely go along with his wishes, but in the end he heard Yi Qingcheng say, "This matter concerns the image of our Yiling sect, so we have to investigate it. However, we should suppress it for now and discuss it after they hand over the spiritual awareness grass." Chiu Mingchong was stunned and could not help but feel disappointed. Duanmu Yu would be severely punished for doing such a thing sooner or later, but in his opinion, the result of discussing it now and later was likely to be very different. At this time, Duanmu Yu was almost standing on the opposite side of all the high-level elders of the sect. Once she was severely punished, her position as the eldest senior sister would definitely be lost, and there might even be a heavier punishment that would make her unable to rise again. However, if they discussed it later, it would be hard to say if she really handed over the spiritual awareness grass. At that time, for the sake of the spiritual awareness grass, the high-level elders of the sect, including his master Yi Qingcheng, would definitely be too embarrassed to kill her. If they were to go easy on her, maybe Duanmu Yu would be able to get away with it. Unfortunately, Chiu Mingchong had no right to speak on this occasion. Yi Qingcheng had the final say. After all, for Yi Qingcheng and the high-level elders of the other sects, punishing Duanmu Yu was only a small matter. The spiritual awareness grass was the most important thing. If Duanmu Yu was forced to completely give up and resist stubbornly because of this matter, it would not be worth it. What are you waiting for? Hurry up and go. Yi Qingcheng glared at him. Yes. Chiu Ming-cheng did not dare to delay and obediently retreated. Soon, Bing Wuqing arrived at the confinement room under Chiu Ming-cheng's guidance. The iron door opened, and Bing Wuqing could not help but frown slightly as she felt the faint fluctuations of the array in front of her. Chapter 5390. He was very sure that no formation could trap Lin Yi, at least not in the primordial underworld. Since it was Lin Yi who asked her to enter, Bing Wuqing naturally did not hesitate and immediately stepped in. All right, since he's here, the three of you can have a good talk. I hope there'll be good news when I come back later. Of course, it'll be good news for you too. Otherwise, you'll be imprisoned in this dark place for the rest of your lives. I'm sure it'll be very frustrating, right? Chiu Ming-cheng laughed, closed the iron door, and left. Boss, what's going on? Bing Wuqing nodded slightly at Duan Muyu, who was beside her as a form of greeting, and asked directly. Lin Yi's letter to him did not mention the specific situation. He only asked him to come over, and he was still confused until now. Duan Muyu couldn't help but look at Lin Yi in surprise when she heard this tone. Previously, during the primordial trials, she did see that there should be some tacit understanding and connection between the two, but she didn't expect it to be this kind of relationship. From this tone, Bing Wuqing was clearly like Wu Qintian and the others, becoming a loyal subordinate of Lin Yi. Others might not be much, but Bing Wuqing was a famous super genius in the entire primordial underworld. She had always been arrogant and rarely looked others in the eye. Now, she was actually willing to submit to Lin Yi. This was really a little embarrassing. However, when she remembered that the other party was Lin Yi after the shock, Duan Muyu felt that this matter was reasonable. Back in the primordial trials, even a legendary existence like Jiuying was frightened by Lin Yi. As long as he wanted to, subduing Bing Wuqing was naturally a piece of cake. Lin Yi told the whole story in a few words. After listening, Bing Wuqing had a strange expression on her face. She carefully looked at Lin Yi and Duan Muyu, and finally came to a conclusion. I didn't know that the higher-ups of the Yiling sect are really good at courting death. He could tell that Duan Muyu and Lin Yi's relationship was not ordinary. Moreover, these people had actually blackmailed Lin Yi himself. If this wasn't courting death, what was? In comparison, the upper echelon members of the Snow Sword School were rather tactful. Duan Muyu was speechless. Even from her point of view, she felt that the higher-ups of her sect were courting death. She wasn't worried about Lin Yi and her situation at all. Instead, she was more worried about Yiling's sect. What if they really angered Lin Yi this time, and he casually destroyed the entire sect? Putting everything else aside, she still had deep feelings for the Yiling sect. Then what does boss mean? Bing Wuqing looked at Lin Yi. There was no need for him to use his brain in such a situation. He would just do whatever Lin Yi said. Even if Lin Yi ordered him to destroy the entire Yiling sect, he would absolutely not object. Of course, for the sake of Duan Muyu, Lin Yi would definitely not do so. There's no hurry. By the way, you saw Chiu Ming-cheng just now. Did he look familiar? Lin Yi suddenly asked. Chiu Ming-cheng? Bing Wuqing thought for a moment and said, he just went to the secular world to train. There doesn't seem to be anything special about him. Wait, he does look a little familiar. Seems like I'm not mistaken. He's one of them. Lin Yi nodded. What are you guys talking about? Duan Muyu was confused. She had no idea what the two of them were talking about. Lin Yi and Bing Wuqing looked at each other. They didn't hide anything anymore and revealed everything. There's an extremely mysterious and powerful organization in the secular world called the Center. After this training in the secular world, they've already instigated many spies in various primordial sects. If I'm not wrong, they've already brought people to infiltrate the primordial underworld. After lying low for a period of time, they'll probably start to encroach on the Primordial Alliance. Encroach on the Primordial Alliance? Is that even possible? Duanmu Yu was dumbfounded. She had never seen the center's strength and resources. Moreover, she was born and raised in the primordial underworld. When she suddenly heard this, she naturally felt that it was a fantasy story. Of course it's possible. They can easily create a bunch of nascent soul old monsters. Given time, how difficult would it be to encroach on the Primordial Alliance? Linny said, create a bunch of nascent soul old monsters. Duanmu Yu was completely dumbfounded. Nascent soul old monsters were the highest combat power in the primordial underworld. If they could really mass produce them, not to mention encroaching on the Primordial Alliance, it wouldn't be difficult for them to directly control the entire primordial underworld. Although she was horrified, Duanmu Yu quickly recovered. At least on the surface, she had regained her composure. She changed the topic and asked, then you said Chiu Ming-chong he's one of the chess pieces that the center has secretly instigated. Linny confirmed. From the first time he met Chiu Ming-chong, he had already been suspicious. However, he didn't have a complete grasp of the center's list of instigated defections. He could only rely on his initial observations. Unless he paid special attention, he would only leave a slight impression. It was only now that he had Bing Wuqing's testimony that he was completely certain. Of course, Bing Wuqing couldn't fully grasp the list of instigated defections. However, every time she contacted the bespectacled doctor, she would more or less meet with other people. Even if she didn't say it explicitly, she could still make some guesses. There's such a thing. Duanmu Yu was instantly shocked and angry. Although it was a question, there was no doubt about the meaning behind it. Otherwise, there was no way to explain Chiu Ming-chong's recent abnormal behavior. Although this guy always had the intention of replacing her, he didn't have the guts to do so in the past. As the three of them spoke, the iron door outside opened. Chiu Ming-chong stood at the door and asked, how did the discussion go? Oh, you mean the consciousness grass? Sorry, it's already been used up by Bing Wuqing. Linny answered casually. This was the truth. The consciousness grass had indeed been used up by Bing Wuqing. Yes, it's quite delicious. Bing Wuqing took the opportunity to reply. She turned to look at Duanmu Yu and said, you ate it too. How did it taste? It was indeed quite delicious. Duanmu Yu cooperated. Since they already knew that the other party was a spy from the center, this matter was no longer something that she or anyone else sent by Yi Ling could deal with. They could only let Lin Yi handle it. They would do whatever Lin Yi said. What? You ate it? Chiu Ming-chong exploded in anger. This time, he had used the consciousness grass to stir up trouble, not just to replace Duanmu Yu's position. More importantly, he had received orders from the center. If he couldn't fish in troubled waters and get the consciousness grass, the consequences would be unimaginable. Chapter 53, 91. Nonsense! It's so hard to get the divine knowledge grass. If it were you, wouldn't you eat it? Linny scoffed. But isn't Duanmu Yu at Foundation Establishment great perfection? Chiu Ming-chong still did not believe it. Sorry, I'm already at the golden core stage. Duanmu Yu smiled faintly. You, Chiu Ming-chong choked, then flew into a rage out of humiliation. He snorted. I really hope this is just a joke. Otherwise, it won't be good news for the three of you. I can only ask my master to personally punish the three of you. Punish us? Duanmu Yu was taken aback. He said with a strange expression, it's fine if they punish me. After all, I'm a disciple of the Yi Ling sect. But these two are outsiders. Even if your master is the sect leader, what right does he have to punish people from other sects? Xiao Mingcheng, is there something wrong with your brain? If this was before, even if he knew that Xiao Mingcheng was up to no good, Duan Muyu would not have said this. But now that he knew that Xiao Mingcheng was a spy, there was nothing to worry about. Humph, since you're in the territory of the Yiling sect, you naturally have to follow the rules of the Yiling sect. Besides, you're just two weaklings. Can't my master, the sect leader, take care of you? Xiao Mingcheng pretended to be pretentious. Of course, he knew that both Lin Yi and Bing Wuqing's powers were not to be underestimated. However, his knowledge was only based on what he had seen in the trial competition. He thought that Lin Yi was invincible below the golden elixir realm, while Bing Wuqing was only at the early stage of the golden elixir realm. Of course, he had to look up to such powers. However, his master, Yi Qingcheng, was a golden elixir perfected being. After hearing his words, Duan Muyu and Bing Wuqing looked at him as if they were looking at an idiot. Only Lin Yi had a look of agreement on his face. What you said makes so much sense that I actually have nothing to say. Duan Muyu and Bing Wuqing rolled their eyes at the same time. They were speechless that Lin Yi would have the mood to joke with this kind of person. Good that you know. Just you wait. Xiao Mingcheng thought that Lin Yi wanted to admit defeat and leave with an arrogant attitude. It was too late for regrets now. In the Divine Leaf Temple, Yi Qingcheng and the other elders were waiting for Xiao Mingcheng's good news. However, after Xiao Mingcheng's report, all of their expressions became ugly. This is too much. Yi Qingcheng suddenly slammed the table, and the huge conference table turned into powder. He was only one step away from breaking through to the nascent soul realm. Now, his only thought was to obtain the divine sense grass to further refine his divine sense. That way, not only could he become the strongest gold core expert in the ancient martial world, he could also lay a good foundation for breaking through to the nascent soul realm. In the process of breaking through to the nascent soul realm, even if it was just a little bit more confident, he absolutely couldn't let it go. The three of them are clearly looking down on Master and our Yiling sect, especially Duan Muyu, who openly slept with an outsider and ruined the sect's reputation. In my opinion, he must be severely punished. Otherwise, if word of this gets out, we'll become the laughingstock of the pugilistic world. Xiao Mingcheng took the opportunity to sow discord. No one had any objections to this. However, one person suddenly stood up. It was a middle-aged man with snow-white hair. He was thin and had a weak aura. At first glance, he looked like a sickly person who couldn't withstand the wind and rain. However, no one present dared to look down on him. Even the sect master, Yi Qingcheng, was wary of him. This person was called Yi Tongxian, and he was Yi Qingcheng's senior and junior brother. At the same time, like Yi Qingcheng, he was the only two golden core perfected experts in the Yiling sect. You said that you or slept with an outsider? Yi Tongxuan's cold gaze pierced Xiao Mingcheng's heart. He subconsciously took a few steps back. One should know that he had another identity, which was Duanmuyu's master. If not for his strong backing, Duanmu, you wouldn't have been able to sit in the position of eldest senior sister so easily. However, before today, Yi Tongxian had been in seclusion, so he didn't know what had happened. He also didn't know that his disciple had been grounded because of the consciousness grass, and even had her chastity tainted. I saw it with my own eyes. She and Lin Yi were alone in a room together. Their clothes were torn to shreds, and they even hid on the bed. If this isn't sleeping with him, what is it? Xiao Mingcheng said stubbornly, "Call you are here. You can confront him. If he says anything false, you can prepare to die." Yi Tongxian snorted coldly. His tone was extremely overbearing. Duanmu Yu was his only direct disciple, and he was famous for being protective of his disciples. Moreover, He had a special identity and was very powerful, not to mention Chiu Ming-chong. Even Yi Qingcheng, the sect master, couldn't do anything to him. Master, Chiu Ming-chong was so scared that his scalp went numb. He could only look at Yi Qingcheng for help. If Yi Tongxian really wanted to kill him, he couldn't do anything unless Yi Qingcheng intervened. It was a pity that Yi Tongxian was famous for being a pain in the neck. Unless it was absolutely necessary, Yi Qingcheng wouldn't want to confront this junior brother of the same sect. However, Chiu Ming-chong was his direct disciple after all, so he couldn't just ignore him. Junior brother, don't be impulsive. If that's the case, Ming-chong, bring Duanmu Yu here with the token to confront him face to face. We'll know the result then, Yi Qingcheng said. If the affair was true, then even if he did not do anything, Yi Tongxian would probably clean up the sect. If this matter was fabricated out of thin air by Chiu Ming-chong, then Chiu Ming-chong only had himself to blame. No matter what, Chiu Ming-chong was just a useless disciple. In Yi Qingcheng's eyes, Chiu Ming-chong did not have much weight. If he was beaten to death, then so be it. Yes, Chiu Ming-chong didn't dare to be negligent. He quickly took the token and went to fetch Duanmu Yu. Having seen that scene with his own eyes, he had full confidence in the matter of Duanmu Yu and Lin Yi. At this time, he wasn't particularly flustered. Before he left, he turned his head and asked, Master, what about Lin Yi and Bing Wuqing? Humph, the black water matrix is a first-class trapping matrix. Even an ordinary, yuanying stage old monster can't break out of the matrix. Let them live and die on their own. Yi Qingcheng snorted coldly. This time, he was determined to get the grasp of consciousness. He didn't expect that it would turn out like this. He couldn't help but be angry. However, as the leader of a sect, he couldn't easily kill a disciple from another sect. That would give others a bad impression. So he might as well imprison him until the end. Very soon, Chiu Ming-chong brought Duanmu Yu over. When Duanmu Yu saw Yi Tongxian, he was instantly delighted. He hurriedly greeted, Master, you've come out of seclusion. You are you. Yi Tongxian originally wanted to ask about the matter of sleeping with him, but when he saw the faint aura around Duanmu Yu, his eyelids twitched. He said in surprise, You've actually succeeded in breaking through to the golden elixir realm, and you're still at the peak of the early golden elixir realm? Chapter 53, 92. As soon as she said this, everyone was in an uproar. At this moment, Duanmu Yu did not deliberately release her aura. No one, including Yi Qingcheng, noticed the change in her body. Only Yi Tongxian, who knew her best, saw through it with one glance. Yi Qingcheng and the others were stunned. Not only did she succeed in breaking through to the golden elixir realm, but she also became a master at the peak of the early golden elixir realm. What was going on? Master, please understand. I made a good friend during this experience in the secular world. Without him, I would not be where I am today. Duanmu Yu said truthfully, although it was only a matter of time before she broke through to the golden elixir realm with her own qualifications. If it were not for Lin Yi, the time would have been dragged on for 3 to 5 years. Moreover, it would have been impossible for her to break through to the peak of the early golden elixir realm at once. Oh, there's actually such an extraordinary person? Yi Tongxian could not help but be surprised. He knew that Duanmu Yu never lied. To be precise, she disdained lying. There was actually someone who could help her break through to the golden elixir realm in such a short period of time. What kind of person was this? At this time, Chiu Ming-chong sneered and said, Hey, you can't be talking about Lin Yi, can you? No wonder you were willing to become his mistress. This is really understandable. You can break through to the golden elixir realm by sleeping with someone and rise 2 levels in a row. No matter who it is, they would be tempted, right? What did you say? Duan Muyu frowned. Pretending? Still pretending at this time? Is there a point? I saw you hiding in bed with my own eyes, and your clothes were torn to pieces on the ground. Dry would met fire. The 2 of you must have gone crazy. Qiu Mingchong said sarcastically. Is this true? Yi Tongxian asked in a low voice. Although he believed in his disciple's character, as Qiu Mingchong said, if Duan Muyu had paid a high enough price, why would the other party help her break through to the golden elixir realm for no reason? The resources needed were not just words. Even as a master of the great perfection of the golden elixir realm, he might not be able to afford it. Before Duan Muyu could say anything, Yi Qingcheng, who was on the other side, had already come to a conclusion. Looks like it's true. If this sect leader remembers correctly, you weren't wearing these clothes before you entered, right? The other elders of the upper echelon all nodded. Duan Muyu was now dressed in the clothes of the mortal world. In the small pugilistic world of the supreme ancient immortal realms, he could be said to be an oddity. It was impossible for them not to notice him. Duan Muyu blushed, which was rare for her. No matter how tough she was, it was impossible for her to say that she had changed her clothes in public. She could only refute. Sect leader Sherbois, you misunderstood me. It's true that I have changed my clothes, but it doesn't mean that I have done anything shameful. You've already rolled in the sheets, but you haven't done anything shameful? Haha, this is really rare. Qiu Mingchong was adamant. This kind of thing was equivalent to mud falling into the crotch of one's pants. Even if it wasn't shit, it was still shit. As long as he insisted on not letting go, Duan Muyu would not be able to prove himself. Even jumping into the Yellow River would not be able to wash himself clean. Duan Muyu was furious, but she really did not know how to prove her innocence at the moment. In the face of the suspicious gazes of Yi Qingcheng and the others, she could not help but feel helpless. She could not possibly take the initiative to let others verify that she was still a virgin. Could she? At this moment, a faint voice suddenly came from the entrance of the God Leaf Palace. Your Yiling sect is really interesting. I just gave you a set of clothes, but you actually keep such a close watch on what female disciples wear. Just how free are you? The higher-ups, really? Who is it? Yi Qingcheng. And the others were shocked at the same time. They had so many Golden Core stage experts, but they did not notice that there were 2 people standing at the entrance. If the other party did not take the initiative to speak, but instead launched a sneak attack, some of them might have already become corpses. The people who came were none other than Lin Yi and Bing Wuqing. Duan Muyu was suddenly brought here at this time, so it was obvious that someone wanted to harm her. Naturally, Lin Yi would not sit idly by and do nothing about it. Without hesitation, he broke out of the array with Bing Wuqing. Although the black water array was powerful, it was really not enough for him, a profound ascension stage, primordial spirit. After all, from the beginning, this array could only be used against ordinary nascent soul stage old monsters. This was already the limit, and there was no concept of a profound ascension stage at all. You have already locked us up. Don't you know who we are? Lin Yi calmly walked to Duan Muyu's side and gave her a look, indicating for her not to worry. Lin Bing Wuqing, Yi Qingcheng frowned and turned to stare at Qiu Mingchong, asking, "What's going on?" I don't know either." Qiu Mingchong was also confused and quickly explained, "I only have a token in my hand, and it was very smooth when I brought Duan Muyu out just now. They were clearly still locked up in the black water array. Could it be that Duan Muyu discovered some loophole in the black water array and secretly told them? Even if he wanted to deny responsibility, he still had to throw the blame on Duan Muyu. Chiu Ming-chong showed everyone what it meant to be a villain. Are you stupid? If she knew about the loophole in the array, she would have come out long ago. Why would she wait until now? Lin Yi looked at this guy as if he was looking at an idiot. How dare you? You trespassed into my Yiling sect's important place and still dare to be so unscrupulous. Do you really think that this sect master will not punish you? Yi Qingcheng was furious when he saw this. He did not want to do anything to Lin Yi and Bing Wuqing. After all, they were from the Yiling sect. It would not be good if he attacked them because he did not get the divine knowledge grass. So, he just wanted to let them fend for themselves. But it was different now. He was in an extremely bad mood at the moment because he did not get the divine knowledge grass. Now that Lin Yi was acting so fearless, wasn't he making things difficult for him in front of everyone? Even if someone were to make some sarcastic remarks about him, he would definitely make this fellow, who didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth, suffer today. Noisy, did I say you could speak? Lin Yi seemed to wave his hand, casually. Yi Qingcheng, who was already angry from embarrassment, suddenly quieted down as if he was possessed. He actually lowered his head and really did not speak. The senior elders of the Yiling sect did not understand what was going on. With their eyesight, they could not see what was going on. They could only see that Lin Yi had made Yi Qingcheng obediently shut up with just a few words. They could not help but feel puzzled. Why was the sect master's temper so good? Who was this guy? Among the crowd, only Yi Tongxian seemed to have noticed something. He looked at Lin Yi with shock and anger. He was about to speak, but he saw Duan Muyu shake his head at him. Only then did he forcibly swallow the words on the tip of his tongue and wait and see. Chapter 53-93. All right, I'll hold a meeting to discuss the traitor of your Yiling sect. Lin Yi naturally took over the reins. The natural aura of a superior that emanated from his body shocked everyone present. This wasn't an aura of actual threat, but it made everyone feel fear and trepidation from the bottom of their hearts, and they didn't dare to look at him directly. The traitor? Yi Tongxian was stunned. At this time, he was the only one who had the confidence to speak. He frowned and asked, "Who are you calling a traitor?" "The traitor I'm talking about, of course, is him." Lin Yi pointed at Chiu Ming-chong with his lips and said, casually, "This guy has been secretly bribed by Xue Jianfeng. He's now Xue Jianfeng's lackey." He didn't want to reveal the Central's affairs for now. Firstly, he was afraid of alerting the enemy. Secondly, he was afraid that it would cause too much of a shock to the Immemorial Alliance and cause chaos in the entire immemorial underworld that would give the Central an opportunity to take advantage of. So he could only reveal it bit by bit. As soon as he said this, everyone's eyes focused on Chiu Ming-chong. Everyone looked suspicious. After all, they weren't fools. Chiu Ming-chong had indeed behaved strangely after returning from the secular world. He wouldn't have stirred up trouble in the past. Could there really be a problem with this guy? T. Chiu Ming-chong was still at a loss. Hearing this, he quickly retorted, "I have nothing to do with Xue Jianfeng. How can I be his lackey? It was you who had an affair with Duan Muyu. You're slandering me and trying to make a false accusation. Master, elders, don't believe this ignorant ****. He's trying to drive a wedge between us." Everyone once again turned their doubtful eyes to Lin Yi. Compared to Chiu Ming-chong, Lin Yi, this outsider with an unknown background, seemed to be a bigger problem. "Do you have evidence?" Yi Tongxian frowned and asked. In the past, Lin Yi might have patiently helped them find evidence. However, he wasn't in the mood today. He immediately said to Bing Wuqing, "I'll leave it to you. If he doesn't admit it, kill him." As soon as he finished speaking, Everyone was dumbfounded. This was Yi Ling's sect. Wasn't this guy being too overbearing? This was Yi Ling's sect's territory, and he was facing Qiu Mingchong, the second-ranked top-notch disciple of Yi Ling's sect. Yet, this fellow couldn't even be bothered to provide the most basic evidence, and just wanted to kill him. Who did he think he was? Aren't you going too far? Yi Tongxian could not stand it any longer. Although he was Duanmu Yu's master, and naturally stood on Duanmu Yu's side, he was still one of the important higher-ups of the Yi Ling sect. He could not stand to see Lin Yi slapping him in the face so unscrupulously. That's right. Who do you think you are? How dare you come here and point your fingers? Another high-level elder stood up angrily. This person was Qiu Hong, an expert at the pinnacle of the late Golden Elixir realm. In terms of strength and status, he was second only to Yi Qingcheng and Yi Tongxian. He had a fiery temper, and most importantly, he was a distant relative of Qiu Mingchong. He could be considered Qiu Mingchong's second backer. At this moment, Yi Qingcheng was not saying anything for some reason, and Qiu Mingchong was being threatened in public. As the second backer, he could only stand up to support the situation. Of course, from Qiu Hong's point of view, Lin Yi and Bing Wuqing were simply acting recklessly, and he could use this opportunity to boost his prestige. Lin Yi ignored him, and neither did Bing Wuqing. After all, she never had the habit of talking nonsense. Seeing the situation, she directly pressed the merciless ice force over. Qiu Hong didn't even have the time to react. He didn't even have the chance to resist, and was pressed to the ground on the spot. Nascent soul realm old monster. Qiu Hong was already speechless. Yi Tongxian and the others were all shocked. After all, this was the headquarters of the Yi Ling sect. Before this, Lin Yi and Bing Wuqing were just courting death in their eyes. Even if Bing Wuqing was widely recognized as a super genius, so what? She was only at the early Golden Elixir realm. At most, she could advance one level to the pinnacle of the early Golden Elixir realm. So what? Who would have thought that she had not only advanced one level, but had also advanced directly to the level of a nascent soul realm old monster? How were they supposed to deal with this? In front of a nascent soul realm old monster, these people were like paper. No wonder Lin Yi was so arrogant. He really had the confidence. The group of Yi Ling sect's higher-ups were all scared silly, Yi Tongxian included, and no one said anything. As for Qiu Hong, who was kneeling on the ground, he did not even dare to raise his head for fear of making eye contact with the other party. If he accidentally angered the other party, he could die. Bing Wuqing's gaze immediately fell on Qiu Mingchong. According to Lin Yi's instructions, if this guy refused to admit it, he could become a corpse. Anyway, they had completely broken off their relationship with the sect, so it did not matter if they killed an unimportant pawn of the sect. Don't come any closer. Qiu Mingchong was so scared that his legs turned to jelly. He would never have thought that there would be a day when he would be cornered to this extent in the Yi Ling sect's headquarters. Based on the other party's attitude, if he dared to deny it, he might really become a corpse. Live or die, you choose, Bing Wuqing said expressionlessly. Qiu Mingchong cursed madly in his heart. Right now, he could only live by admitting that he was a spy. But if he did that, would these people from Yi Ling's sect let him go? In the end, he would still die. Unfortunately, Bing Wuqing was obviously not in the mood to think so much for him. Seeing that he was hesitating, she directly enveloped him with her heartless ice force. With Qiu Mingchong's meager strength, he did not even need to do anything. In the blink of an eye, he would be frozen into a popsicle. Master, save me. Master's junior uncle, save me. Qiu Mingchong felt as if he had fallen into an ice cellar. He screamed in panic, but the group of Yi Ling sect's higher-ups pretended not to hear him. What a joke! How could they dare to be presumptuous in front of a nascent soul old monster like Bing Wuching? Then die. Bing Wuching made the final death sentence. No, if you dare to kill me, you'll definitely die a worse death than me in the future. Xue Jianfeng will avenge me. Qiu Mingchong shouted at the top of his lungs in a final struggle. Actually, Linny was not wrong at all. His current superior was no longer the bespectacled professor, but really Xue Jianfeng. In order to show how much importance he attached to Xue Jianfeng, the bespectacled professor had already assigned a portion of his spies to him. Meanwhile, he himself only paid attention to a few high-end combatants, including Xue Jianfeng. There was no need for him to be distracted by a nobody like Qiu Mingchong. After shouting this, Qiu Mingchong closed his eyes and waited for his death. However, after a moment of fear and trepidation, he realized that the bone-chilling aura that enveloped him had suddenly dissipated. Bing Wuching had actually let him go. Chapter 5394. As he spoke, Lin Yi released Yi Qingqing's primordial spirit. This guy suddenly stopped moving just now because his primordial spirit was taken away by Lin Yi's soul-hooking hand. Now that his primordial spirit was back, Yi Qingqing was horrified. The experience just now was too horrifying. He didn't want to experience the feeling of his life and death being in the hands of the other party again. Deal with this traitor yourselves. I won't interfere, Lin Yi said lightly. This. Yi Qingqing hesitated. Qiu Mingchong was his direct disciple, and he wouldn't abandon him unless he had no other choice. But now that Qiu Mingchong had publicly admitted his identity as a spy, especially with Lin Yi and Bing Wuching, these two unfathomable guys, watching him covetously, he didn't dare to play any tricks at this time. He could only bite the bullet and say, "Guards! Take Qiu Mingchong, this traitor, into custody. We'll discuss how to deal with him later." Lin Yi didn't have any objections. He dragged Qiu Mingchong out purely to help Duan Muyu out of trouble. As for whether Qiu Mingchong was dead or alive, he didn't care at all. Moreover, from the standpoint of Yiling's sect, it was hateful to discover such a traitor, but they couldn't execute him directly. There were still many things that needed to be clarified. For example, why did Xue Jianfeng bribe Qiu Mingchong? Watching the dejected Qiu Mingchong being taken away, Lin Yi glanced at Yi Qingqing and the others and said, "Now, does anyone still believe Qiu Mingchong's slander of Miss Duanmu?" No, you must be joking. How can we believe the words of a traitor? Yi Qingqing hurriedly smiled apologetically and humbly. The others might be mainly afraid of Bing Wuching, the nascent soul realm old monster, but in his eyes, Lin Yi was the most terrifying existence. This guy was definitely much more terrifying than the average nascent soul realm old monster. Is that so? Then what about the divine knowledge grass? Lin Yi raised his eyebrows and said casually. Yi Qingqing and the others broke out in a cold sweat. When they recalled how they had tried to force Lin Yi and Bing Wuching to ask for the divine knowledge grass previously, they felt as though 10,000 horses were galloping through their hearts. Now that they thought about it, they realized that they were practically seeking death in all sorts of ways. A heavenly treasure, like the spirit knowledge, grass naturally belongs to those who are able to obtain it. Only people of your strength are qualified to do so. We were rude before, so I sincerely apologize to you on behalf of Yiling's sect. Yi Qingqing hurriedly said, respectfully. Lin Yi glanced at Duan Muyu. When he heard that, he had come here purely to visit a friend, and it was entirely up to Duan Muyu to decide whether or not to make a fuss and take revenge. As for himself, it didn't matter. At his level, he wouldn't take such a small matter to heart, much less Bing Wuching. Duan Muyu returned a pleading look. She had suffered a lot during this period of time, but after all, she had deep feelings for Yiling's sect. Since the culprit Chiu Ming-chong had been taken care of, the matter would end here. Otherwise, Yi Ling's sect would be the one to suffer losses. All right, on account of Miss Duanmu, I'll temporarily accept your insincere apology. However, I'll say the ugly words first. I don't have a good temper. If there's a next time, I won't be so nice anymore. Lin Yi took the opportunity to give everyone a heads up. In this way, if Yi Qingqing and the others wanted to settle accounts with Duanmu later, they would have to think twice. Yes, yes, yes. Thank you for your magnanimity, Senior. We are very grateful. Yi Qingqing didn't dare to refute, even though he was a sect leader, and even though there was only a thin line between golden core perfected and nascent soul old monsters. This thin line meant that he had no right to speak in front of Lin Yi and Bing Wuqing. They could kill him with just a thought. So what could he do? Yi Qingqing's only thought at this moment was to send Lin Yi and Bing Wuqing away as soon as possible. This time, for the sake of the consciousness grass, he had been blinded by Chiu Ming-chong's instigation and had set his sights on the two of them. Now, it was easy to invite them in, but difficult to send them away. He was in a difficult position. The key was that he couldn't directly ask them to leave. His eyes turned, and he had an idea in this emergency. Both of you are experts, and we are too weak to serve you well. Why don't I report to our sect's Grand Supreme Elder and ask him to entertain the two of you? It was the rule of Jianghu to have a nascent soul old monster entertain a nascent soul old monster. It was reasonable for him to suggest this. At least he could avoid being bullied unilaterally. Otherwise, it would be really stressful for him and the group of Gold Course stage higher-ups to talk. Whatever. Lin Yi waved his hand non-committally. He had no interest in the Yi Ling sect's Grand Supreme Elder, but since he was here, there was no harm in meeting him. It could also be considered as helping Duanmu you gain some face. Okay. Please wait for a moment. Seniors, I'll report to the Grand Supreme Elder right away. Yi Qingqing immediately rushed out. Logically speaking, even if they were to ask for the Grand Supreme Elder's permission, there was no need for him, the sect leader, to go personally. However, he couldn't have asked for more. After all, Chiu Ming-chong was his personal disciple. Although Chiu Ming-chong had instigated the matter of the consciousness grass, it was mainly his own idea. At this time, he didn't dare to stay in front of Lin Yi and Bing Wuqing for even a moment. The pressure was too great. After a while, an old man in green walked quickly into the God Leaf Hall, accompanied by Yi Qingqing. His aura was hidden, but it gave people a feeling of unfathomable depth. All the higher-ups of the Yi Ling sect, including Yi Tongxian and Duanmu Yu, hurriedly greeted him in unison. Without a doubt, this was the Yi Ling sect's Grand Supreme Elder, Yi Yixing. Not only was he the Grand Supreme Elder, but he was also Yi Qingqing's and Yi Tongshuan's master. In other words, he was Duanmu Yu's master. My two friends have come to visit. Please forgive me for not going out to greet you. Yi Yixing cupped his hands in greeting and smiled. All these years, he had been in a state of semi-isolation. If something like this had not happened, he would normally not have come out. Bing Wuqing looked at him with some scrutiny. He was a little stronger than her at the middle nascent soul stage. However, it was obvious that this guy had internal injuries. Ordinary people couldn't see it, but it couldn't escape the observation of an expert at the peak of the early nascent soul stage. Chapter 53, 95. Cultivation was like rowing a boat against the current. If you did not advance, you would fall behind. Lin Yi knew very well what it meant for the other party to be injured for such a long time without being able to recover. Even though this Supreme Elder of the Yi Ling sect was still a top-rate existence that was like a pillar that stabilized the world, if this were to continue developing, then it wouldn't be long before this supreme elder of the Yiling sect would step down from his peak, unless he obtained a fortuitous encounter before the situation worsened to the worst. To some extent, Lin Yi's appearance itself represented a fortuitous encounter. Unfortunately, Lin Yi had no intention of giving the other party a fortuitous encounter. Yi Yixing was indeed Duanmu Yu's grandmaster, and for Duanmu Yu's sake, theoretically, Lin Yi would show some kindness, but that was on the premise that he found the other party pleasing to the eye. But now, because of Duanmu Yu's experience, basically no one in the entire Yiling sect could enter Lin Yi's eyes, including Yi Yixing, the Grand Supreme Elder. Lin Yi did not believe that this old guy did not know that Duanmu Yu was forced to give up the divine knowledge grass. Acquiescence was Yi Yixing's attitude. In that case, he had to pay the corresponding price. Of course, for Duanmu Yu's sake, Lin Yi would not impose additional punishment on him. Otherwise, even if the other party was a middle-stage nascent soul expert, he would not be able to fight back in front of him. Lin Yi's side showed a lack of interest, while Yi Yixing's side was wary. After all, in his current state, Bing Wuqing, who was at the peak of the early-stage nascent soul, was enough to make him suffer. With the addition of Lin Yi, whose strength was unknown once a fight broke out, he had no chance of winning. With such attitudes, after a few words of greeting, the atmosphere quickly fell into an awkward silence. Yi Yixing was the same as Yi Qingcheng. Right now, the most important thing in his eyes was to quickly send Lin Yi and Bing Wuqing away. Otherwise, he would not be at ease. Since there's nothing else, I'll take my leave. Lin Yi was not an insensible person. He knew that his purpose of helping Duanmu Yu's growth had been achieved, and staying any longer would only be as bad as not doing enough. He immediately called Bing Wuqing and prepared to leave. All right, fellow Taoists, please take care. Forgive this old man for not seeing you off. Yi Yixing and the others heaved a sigh of relief. At this time, Duanmu Yu suddenly stopped him and said, "Wait, it's rare for you to come all the way to see me, and you even encountered these things. As the host, shouldn't you let me entertain you before you leave? Is this appropriate?" Lin Yi glanced at Yi Yi's group. It's appropriate. Ye's group nodded hurriedly. At this time, they felt very guilty. As long as Duanmu Yu's request was not too excessive, they had to agree. The Rain Admiration Pavilion was one of the many independent pavilions in the Leaf Spirit sect. Apart from its relatively quiet and elegant surroundings, there was nothing special about it. If one had to say, its owner was Duanmu Yu. As a woman, no matter how manly her actions were, she would never be able to change her weak and sentimental side. This was not often shown on Duanmu Yu, but some clues could be seen from the various arrangements in the Rain Admiration Pavilion. "Ha, I thought you lived in the same place as us. Turns out you're still a little feminine." Lin Yi looked around in surprise. Duanmu Yu looked at him with hidden bitterness and said faintly, "I'm a woman after all right? Don't tell me I'm a real man in your eyes." "Not to that extent. You're a manly woman." Lin Yi laughed. As their friendship deepened, the way they spoke to each other became more familiar. Otherwise, he wouldn't have made such a joke. Manly woman? Duanmu Yu frowned and digested the meaning of this secular word. Then, the corner of her mouth suddenly curled up. "Wait for me, I'll go change my clothes." "Change your clothes?" Lin Yi was stunned, but Duanmu Yu didn't give him a chance to ask. She turned around and went to the bedroom, leaving him alone in the pavilion to wait. As for Bing Wuqing, she didn't follow him. She stayed in the God Leaf Palace to be entertained by Yi Yixing and the others. Anyone could see that Duanmu Yu wanted to entertain Lin Yi alone. Bing Wuqing was a sensible person, so she naturally wouldn't follow him and be a third wheel. After the time it took for a joss stick to burn, when Duanmu Yu reappeared in front of him, Lin Yi was dumbfounded. Actually, there was nothing special about it. It was just a plain dress that was commonly seen in the immemorial pugilistic world. However, when it was worn by Duan Muyu, there was a different kind of charm. It was a unique charm that was extremely rare to see on other women. Heroic, gentle, Duan Muyu in a plain dress perfectly blended the two together. Although with her looks, she definitely wouldn't look bad in other clothes. Especially when she wore the secular women's clothes that Linny gave her, it was undeniable that the Duan Muyu in front of him was the most beautiful Duan Muyu. On her, Lin Yi saw true femininity for the first time. Why? Is it very awkward? Duan Muyu looked at Lin Yi's strange expression and couldn't help but feel a little nervous. With her style, she rarely dressed like this, and it might not even happen once a year. Today was considered a special treatment for Lin Yi. No, it's quite nice. Lin Yi pinched his nose awkwardly. He had always been surrounded by beautiful women, and his immunity to beautiful women had already reached the level of a master. Normally, he wouldn't look like a pervert. However, the contrast between Duan Muyu's appearance and just now was too big. Normally, anyone would be stunned, especially a hot-blooded man. Is that so? Duan Muyu blushed for the first time. Then, she hurriedly turned around and brewed some tea as a cover. This is the emerald grass I just brewed. It's a good tea unique to our Yiling sect. You can't buy it outside. Try it. One night stand. Lin Yi's expression suddenly became extremely strange. What? Duan Muyu didn't react. Nothing. Lin Yi immediately blushed with shame. Fortunately, she didn't know the meaning of the word, or else he might have thought that he was flirting with her. He took the teacup and took a sip, then praised, "Although I don't know much about tea, your tea does leave a fragrant aftertaste in my mouth. Drink the tea, look at the lake, and if I can listen to music, that would be perfect." "You want to listen to music?" Duan Muyu glanced at him, turned around, walked to the side, and lifted the curtain. Lin Yi thought it was just another table, but he didn't expect it to be a guqin under the curtain. The melodious sound of the guqin rang out. Looking at Duan Muyu's focused appearance, Lin Yi couldn't help but smile playfully. Today, Duan Muyu was really like a different person from before. Chapter 5396. Intuition told Lin Yi that Duan Muyu must have her own reasons for doing this. However, it was almost evening, and Duan Muyu still did not say anything special. It seemed that she really just wanted to entertain him alone. With a stomach full of puzzlement, Lin Yi said goodbye to Duan Muyu and left Yiling's sect with Bing Wuqing. "She seems to have something to say," Bing Wuqing suddenly said. "Unfortunately, she doesn't seem to want to say it." Lin Yi shook his head helplessly. This matter had troubled him for the whole afternoon. He had been wondering if Duan Muyu had any other difficulties. But after thinking about it carefully, she was already an expert at the peak of the early gold elixir realm, and she had powerful external help like himself and Bing Wuqing. Even if Yi Qingcheng wanted to deal with her, he would have to think carefully. Theoretically, there should not be any other difficulties. Perhaps he had been shocked by the other party's femininity today and was overthinking things. The two talked as they came to the lakeside. At this time, a huge flying spirit beast suddenly descended from the sky. It was a thorny eagle with blade-like feathers, and an old acquaintance alighted from its back. It was the young master of the Thousand Blades sect, Ling Tianyu. What a coincidence! Seeing this, Lin Yi smiled slightly. Although they were not very close friends, he had a good impression of this super genius. Ling Tianyu could be considered one of the few friends he had in the immemorial underworld. "Ha, this is not a coincidence. I heard that Brother Lin came to Yiling's sect, so I specially came here to show my hospitality as a host." Ling Tianyu laughed. He was a little surprised to see Bing Wuqing beside him, but he soon understood. ordinary people would think of ways to draw a genius like Bing Wuching to their side, provided that they had the ability to do so. And, obviously, Lin Yi had the ability. Hospitality, as a host, is your Thousand Blades sect also nearby? Lin Yi asked. Yes, our two sects' territories are adjacent to each other, so I can be considered half a host here. Ling Tianyu smiled and said, There happens to be a pavilion here. I've prepared some good wine and delicacies for Brother Lin. Take it as a welcoming dinner for you. He didn't have any intention of directly inviting Lin Yi to the Thousand Blades sect. Firstly, their friendship hadn't reached that stage yet. Secondly, he was afraid that if Lin Yi went, it would be difficult for him to usurp the host's position. After all, the current Thousand Blades sect wasn't the same as before. At the very least, it didn't have a nascent soul cultivator to hold the fort. Then it would be impolite to refuse. Lin Yi didn't decline, and immediately sat down opposite Ling Tianyu with Bing Wuching. He didn't dislike Ling Tianyu's tactful way of expressing goodwill. The three of them sat down, and Ling Tianyu first toasted 3 times. Although he didn't say any pleasantries, everyone could see the gratitude in his words. Unlike Xue Jianfeng, this super genius of the Thousand Blades school wasn't someone who would bite the hand that fed him. I heard about what Brother Lin did in the Blue Cloud sect of the North Island. What a big move. I believe the whole Archaic Alliance will be in an uproar, Ling Tianyu said. A nascent soul cultivator, like Chunjiu, was killed, and the Blue Cloud sect of the North Island changed. This wasn't a trivial matter for the whole archaic underworld. After all, it was a sect of one of the 10 small families. It might seem stable in the short term, but the follow-up effects would come soon. It was just that the matter hadn't completely fermented yet. Will it? Lin, he was a little surprised. Of course, he knew that this kind of thing would cause some disturbance, but he had no idea what kind of external impact it would have. After all, his understanding of the Archaic Alliance was really limited. Of course it will. The Blue Cloud sect of the North Island is one of the 10 small families and is also a main member of the North Island Alliance. It has a lot of influence in the whole Archaic Alliance. Brother Lin, I don't know how many people are watching your sudden appearance. Not to mention that this year is so special, Ling Tianyu said with a smile. Special? How is it special? Lin, he couldn't help but ask. Among all the major powers in the supreme ancient underworld, the 4 great clans and sects stand at the top, while the 10 small clans and sects are second to them. These 14 powers control at least 80% of the experts and resources, and they control the fate of the entire supreme ancient underworld. In order to be ranked among them, all the clans and sects are willing to pay any price. And this year is the year of the general election. Ling Tianyu's eyes shone as he spoke. The election year? Lin, he had a strange expression. This word made him subconsciously think of the various elections in the secular world, but this was only the system of ordinary society, and was not realistic in the cultivation world where the strong were respected. Could it be that the archaic small underworld also did this? Yes, the election of 1,000 years. This is a rule set by the Archaic Alliance when it was first established. From the 4 big families to the 10 small families, every position must be reevaluated, and the strong will be in the top position, while the weak will be eliminated. This is a rare event in the entire archaic small underworld. Brother Lin, haven't you heard of it? Ling Tianyu said, and glanced at Bing Wuching. Although the latter had now openly joined Lin Yi's team, he would not meddle in other people's business. Even if he knew about the election of 1,000 years, he would not care too much, let alone take the initiative to mention it to Lin Yi. I really haven't heard of it. Lin Yi shook his head and said doubtfully, but if I remember correctly, whether it is the 4 big families or the 10 small families, it seems that they are divided according to the number of Yuaning realm old monsters. Is there a need for an election? The number of Yuaning realm old monsters in a sect was something obvious. In theory, there was no need for any election at all. The so-called election of 1,000 years couldn't just be a formality, right? Indeed, but there is also a difference in strength between the Yuaning realm old monsters. Even if there is a Yuaning realm old monster in each sect, and they are all in the 10 small families, there is still a ranking. The stronger the Yuaning realm old monster, the higher the status of the sect and family they belong to, and the more power they have in various major events. Therefore, it is no exaggeration to say that the election of 1,000 years is actually a reshuffle of the top experts of the entire archaic small underworld. Who is strong and who is weak will always be determined, Ling Tianyu explained. The school bell has been writing for more than 5 years. Recently, she has also encountered some bottlenecks in the plot. Murloc intends to adjust her thinking, so she will temporarily maintain 1 chapter a day from this month onwards. But today, Murloc's new book, School Bell CEO Relies on Me, will be released. Readers who don't have enough to read can go check out the new book. Thank you for your continued support. According to what you said, the Yuaning realm old monsters of each sect and family will fight with each other? Lin Yi's interest was piqued. Chapter 5397. Although he was the young head of the Thousand Blades sect, he was only an expert at the peak of the late stage of Foundation Establishment realm, far from the level of a Yuaning realm old monster. He had only heard rumors about these things, but he didn't know the details. Well, at the level of a Yuaning realm old monster, they don't really need to fight to decide who is better. By the way, since the Millennium Selection is a grand event of the entire primitive small Jianghu, it shouldn't be a gathering of Yuaning realm old monsters, right? Linny asked. Of course not. Although Yuaning realm old monsters are the decisive threshold to measure the level of a sect or family, other aspects can't be ignored. The competition between the backbone experts of the Gold Core stage, especially the competition between the young disciples, is the highlight, Ling Tianyu said. It seems that there will be a good show to watch. Linny nodded. Ha, Brother Lin, you are now the actual controller of the Blue Cloud sect of the North Island. The position that the Blue Cloud sect can occupy depends on you. At that time, you will also have to suppress the young disciples in the competition. Even if you want to watch a good show, you don't have the time, do you? Ling Tianyu couldn't help but laugh. Lin, he almost forgot about this. He shook his head and asked with a smile, what about your Thousand Blades sect? We have no choice. We don't have any Yuaning realm old monsters now, so we have no hope of becoming one of the 10 small sects and families. We can only try to fight for a strong position in the periphery first, such as getting a substitute qualification from one of the 10 small sects and families. Although we won't have much say in this way, we can at least get some benefits when something happens and prepare to return to the 10 small sects and families in the future. Ling Tianyu had a wry smile on his face, but his tone was extremely firm. This unprecedented super genius of the Thousand Blades sect was obviously full of confidence in reviving the sect. The hope of the Thousand Blades sect was all tied to him. Substitute qualification. Since you can become one of the 10 small sects and families, it means that each of them has a Yuaning realm old monster. Even if your Thousand Blades sect also has a Yuaning realm old monster, you can't be the 11th, right? Linny asked curiously. Theoretically, yes, but it's not like there's no chance at all. Ling Tianyu smiled profoundly. What do you mean? Linny asked. Ling Tianyu glanced at Bing Wuqing, who was beside him. Instead of answering, he smiled and said, speaking of which, I haven't congratulated Brother Bing yet. Advancing to the nascent soul realm is a joyous occasion. Let me offer you a toast. Of course, Bing Wuqing's strength couldn't be hidden from Ling Tianyu. Ordinary people would tremble in fear in front of a nascent soul realm old monster, but Ling Tianyu didn't feel the slightest bit of restraint. In fact, from the moment they met, other than greeting each other, he didn't even say a word, let alone flatter her. As a Foundation Establishment realm expert, Ling Tianyu was able to completely ignore the presence of a nascent soul realm old monster. Bing Wuqing nodded slightly and toasted with him. She didn't show the slightest contempt. Even though she was an expert at the peak of the early nascent soul realm, she wouldn't underestimate Ling Tianyu because of this. After all, the other party had 1,000 blades flying at the same time. After the two of them toasted, Ling Tianyu continued. Snow Sword faction already has 3 nascent soul realm old monsters. Such a luxurious lineup is no longer something that the 10 small sects and clans can accommodate. Snow Sword faction's target this time is the 4 big sects and clans that stand at the top. Brother Bing, am I right? That's exactly what I meant. Bing Wuqing nodded. The 4 big sects and clans represented the top status and strength. It was something that everyone in Snow Sword faction dreamed of. Now that they finally had such an opportunity, they naturally wouldn't let it go. That's right. Maybe after this Millennium election, the 4 big sects and clans will become 5. At that time, one of the 10 small sects and clans will become vacant. Won't our 1,000 Blades faction have the opportunity to fill in the vacancy? Ling Tianyu said with a smile. But what if Snow Sword faction can't advance further? Linny asked. It's not that there's no chance. The other 10 small sects and clans will more or less encounter some problems. Take Yi Ling's sect, for example. There are rumors in Jianghu that their supreme elder Yi Yixing suffered a backlash and hasn't recovered yet. Once his strength falls out of the nascent soul realm, this millennium election will be very dangerous. He might even be removed from the list. Ling Tianyu said. Yes, Yi Yixing's condition is indeed not very optimistic. If he keeps recuperating in seclusion, he might be a little better. But if he really goes out to fight with other nascent soul old monsters for this millennium election, the consequences will be unimaginable. Lin, he had the right to speak on this matter. Yi Ling's sect was already in such a precarious situation, but Yi Qingcheng and the others were still messing around internally. They were simply courting death. Yi Ling's sect knows this situation better than anyone else. As soon as I came back, I heard that they had already made preparations. There's a Qin family nearby. It's a local family, and originally it wasn't anything special. But 2 years ago, a nascent soul old monster appeared out of nowhere. It's a pity that their foundation is too weak. Otherwise, they might be able to take advantage of this millennium election to become one of the 10 small sects and clans. Ling Tianyu said. What does the Qin family have to do with Yi Ling's sect's preparations? Linny asked. The Qin family has a nascent soul old monster, but no foundation. Yi Ling's sect has a foundation, but a nascent soul old monster can't. Don't these two complement each other? So, someone proposed a marriage alliance. The Qin family has a nascent soul old monster's grandson, Qin Xiaohao, while the Yi Ling sect has your friend, Duanmu Yu. Ling Tianyu intentionally reminded him. In the small pugilistic world of the primordial era, it was nothing new for different sects and families to work together because of benefits. The Blue Cloud sect and the Chun family of the Northern Island were examples. Yi Ling's sect was forced to do so they could only follow suit. What? Lin Yi was stunned for a long time. Only now did he finally understand Duanmu Yu's unusual behavior. She, who had always been elegant and neat, suddenly showed her feminine side to him. It turned out that she was going to marry someone soon. Suddenly hearing this news, Lin Yi's heart was inexplicably moved. He and Duanmu, you had never thought about the relationship between a man and a woman before, mainly because Duanmu, you was too manly most of the time. No matter how happy they were when they got along, Lin he wouldn't take the initiative to contact her in this direction, mainly because he was embarrassed. I treat you as a brother, but you actually want to *CK me? If Duanmu you said this, it would be so embarrassing, right? Chapter 53:98. And it was certain that Duanmuyu's feelings for him were not purely brotherly. Otherwise, there would not be such a unique treatment just now. With Lin Yi's character, since he found out that they both liked each other, and now that he suddenly learned that Duanmuyu was forced to marry someone else, he would feel very uncomfortable if he just stood by and did nothing to stop it. But the problem was that Duanmuyu's action was a hint, but she didn't say it out loud. She didn't say anything, which in itself might represent her attitude. The subtext was that she did like Lin Yi, but she decided to accept her fate. In this way, even if Lin Yi wanted to stop it, it would be very difficult. What reason could he use to stop it? And what identity could he use to stop it? Lin Yi fell into silence for a while. Bing Wuqing saw this, but unfortunately, others couldn't help in this kind of thing. As for Ling Tianyu, he still didn't realize it. Seeing that Lin Yi didn't speak for a long time, Ling Tianyu thought he was a little drunk. After all, the wine he brought had a lingering effect, and it was easy for people who drank it for the first time to drink too much. He immediately suggested, "It's getting late, and there's an inn nearby that belongs to my Thousand Blades sect. Why don't you two rest for a night, and I'll take you to a good place tomorrow morning." That's good. At this time, Lin Yi's mind was not on this at all. Anyway, he was going to walk around Middle Island during this period of time, so he could do whatever the other parties said. After tossing and turning all night, the next morning, Ling Tianyu woke up Lin Yi with a mysterious look, but he didn't speak directly. Instead, he looked at Bing Wuqing, as if he wanted to say something. He took Lin Yi to this good place to repay his kindness, but Bing Wuqing was different. He had nothing to do with Bing Wuqing. Although they were not enemies, they were not friends either. So he was in a difficult position. If it had been anyone else, they would have tactfully taken the initiative to avoid arousing suspicion. However, Bing Wuqing was completely indifferent to this. With her strength and temperament, she would never act according to other people's intentions, unless Lin Yi said so. "Wuqing is one of us. Wherever I can go, he can go." Of course, if Brother Ling feels that it's inconvenient to bring two people at once, then forget it, Lin Yi said. Upon hearing this, Bing Wuqing didn't say anything, but the way she looked at Lin Yi warmed. Even though he always looked cold and indifferent, his heart was still made of flesh. He didn't care about ordinary people, but Boss Lin Yi's approval was still very important to him. Ling Tianyu was a little embarrassed, but he still gritted his teeth and said, "Fine, let's go together." The three of them immediately stepped onto the flying spirit beast, and they flew for 2 days and 2 nights. Their destination was not the middle island that Lin Yi thought, but an isolated island in the south. Even Bing Wuqing, a native of the ancient martial world, didn't know about its location. "This good place that you mentioned is really mysterious. What are we doing here?" Lin Yi and Bing Wuqing looked at each other, their eyes full of doubt. With their strength, they didn't need to be afraid of anything, but this place was really a little mysterious. Don't be impatient. You'll know when we get there." Ling Tianyu smiled mysteriously. This island wasn't big, but the terrain was extremely long and narrow. Looking from above, it looked like a giant half-coiled snake. Ling Tianyu led the two to land at the tail of the snake, which was at the lowest point of the terrain. Not only the three of them, but there were also people rushing over in 2s and 3s from other directions. Whether by tacit agreement or by rule, Everyone landed in the same open space. After landing, these people didn't act on their own, but gathered together. They seemed to be extremely vigilant toward each other, and even had obvious hostility toward each other. It was just that no one wanted to stir up trouble. Lin Yi glanced around and found that these people were very careful. Even if they were in the same trade, they wouldn't talk to each other easily. Even if they did talk, they would set up a sound isolating formation beforehand, so no one could hear what they were saying. Of course, with Lin Yi's strength, it wouldn't be difficult for him to eavesdrop on these people's conversations if he really wanted to. After all, the strongest among them were only at the Golden Core stage, and the weakest were only at the Foundation Establishment stage. But the weakest were at the Foundation Establishment late stage. But with Ling Tianyu standing beside him, Lin Yi didn't need to do anything unnecessary, and just asked directly, "Can you tell me now? What's going on?" Lin Yi turned his head and asked, "Actually, even if I don't say it, I think Brother Lin and Brother Bing can roughly guess what's going on. We are here to participate in a secret trial. This place is one of the most secretive islands in the entire ancient underworld, Tai Snake Island," Ling Tianyu finally explained. "The legendary Tai Snake Island?" Lin Yi didn't say anything, but Bing Wuqing was slightly stunned when she heard this word. Although she had no idea about this place, she had heard of Tai Snake Island. That's right. It is said that this Tai Snake Island was formed from the body of an ancient vicious beast, Tai Snake. Therefore, when you look at it from a bird's eye view, it is in the shape of a giant snake. In the entire ancient Jianghu, there are many who have heard of this place, but those who know its exact location are few and far between. Lin Yi was planning to learn more about it when a middle-aged man in black came from afar. He was wearing a typical butler's uniform. Everywhere he passed, the people around him uncharacteristically took the initiative to greet him with a smile. It seemed that his background was not small. "Young Master Ling, we meet again." The middle-aged man in black quickly came in front of the three and took the initiative to greet Ling Tianyu. "Yes, it's been 3 years. How have you been? Steward you." Ling Tianyu also smiled and nodded. "It seems that this is your first time here. How should I address you? Steward you?" The middle-aged man in black turned to look at Lin Yi and Bing Wuqing. "Let me introduce you. This is the Grand Master Lin Yi of the Blue Cloud sect of the North Island, and this is Bing Wuqing of the Snow Sword sect. I brought them here." Ling Tianyu took the initiative to introduce them. He pointed at the black-robed man and said, "This is the steward in charge of Tai Snake Island. Steward you. His seniority in the Archaic Alliance is one of the best. It's just that few outsiders know about him. Nice to meet you." Steward Yu nodded slightly at Lin Yi and Bing Wuqing, not showing any surprised expression. Of course, this was because Lin Yi and Bing Wuqing had habitually restrained their aura. Otherwise, if he really knew that there was a nascent soul old monster standing in front of him, he would not be so calm, unless he was the nascent soul old monster. Chapter 53, 99. Everyone looked at each other and smiled. Only Lin Yi was confused. He knew about the divine knowledge grass, but what was the divine knowledge fruit? The divine knowledge fruit is one of the most precious treasures of heaven and earth. Together with the divine knowledge grass, they are known as the divine knowledge twin treasures. Bing Wuqing became a little excited. "Tell me the details," Lin Yi said casually. "The effect of the divine knowledge grass is to refine one's divine sense, while the divine knowledge fruit can directly upgrade one's primordial spirit by 1 level. Bing Wuqing was not a man who was easily moved, but the temptation of the divine knowledge fruit was endless for any expert. The higher the level of strength, the more irresistible this temptation was. The same upgrade of the primordial spirit was a completely different concept for a Foundation establishment expert and a nascent soul old monster. Then what will happen if I eat more? Linny asked. Ling Tianyu froze for a moment when he heard this, then interjected with a strange look on his face. This is a spiritual knowledge fruit, just like the spiritual knowledge grass. It is a rare treasure that can only be found by chance. How can it be so easy to find? It is already a great fortune to have one. Brother Lin, why don't you even know this? What if I'm extremely lucky? Lin, he did not give up at all. I don't know. Maybe I can upgrade one level with one divine knowledge fruit, but if I eat too much of it, I will definitely develop a resistance. Who knows? Ling Tianyu shook his head and laughed. Linny nodded, seeing that everyone around him, including Bing Wuqing, were so eager. He couldn't help but ask curiously, the divine knowledge fruit can directly upgrade one's primordial spirit by one level. This is very rare, but it is only upgrading one's primordial spirit, not real strength. Is there a need to be so excited? In his opinion, the divine knowledge fruit sounded covetous, but in terms of effect, it was not as effective as the Foundation Establishment pill or the Golden Core pill. There was no reason to be so excited, right? Brother Lin, what you're saying is fresh. If one's primordial spirit is upgraded, wouldn't it be a matter of time for one's strength to increase? In our immemorial Jianghu, all the major sects and clans focus on cultivating divine sense. Upgrading one's primordial spirit naturally means that one's strength will rise along with it. Moreover, the divine sense fruit has a similar tempering effect to the divine sense grass to a certain extent, but it's not as extreme, Ling Tianyu explained in surprise. I see. Upon hearing this, Lin Yi suddenly understood. He had long known that the ancient small world and the Heaven Step Island walked two completely different paths. The former focused on the divine sense, while the latter focused on the physical body. Ling Tianyu's explanation made it even clearer. While the few of them were talking, Marquis Yu continued to speak in a clear voice. All right, since everyone is able to come here, I'm sure you all know the rules. I won't waste everyone's time by talking nonsense. 300 spiritual jade per person, and you may enter. 300 spiritual jades. It didn't sound like a lot. If it was on the Heaven Step Island, it would only be a small number, but this was the ancient small world. The scarcity of spiritual jades was far greater than that on the Heaven Step Island. For the majority of people, this was already a sky-high price. The key point was that it wasn't guaranteed to find the divine knowledge fruit, but simply an admission ticket. 300 spiritual jades for an admission ticket was already extravagant to a certain extent. Even in the entire ancient small world, there wouldn't be many people who could afford this price. From this, it could be seen that the quality of the people present, even if they weren't absolutely tyrannical in terms of strength, at least their identity and status were absolutely unquestionable. As Marquis Yu's voice fell, most people didn't have any strange expressions, but a few people's expressions changed, including Ling Tianyu. Isn't it 200 spiritual jades? How did it suddenly become 300? Ling Tianyu had a pained expression. Young sect masterling, don't you know that this rule has been changed since last year? Marquis Yu explained. I really didn't know. Ling Tianyu couldn't help but smile bitterly. In the past, he had always come with his master. It was only last year that he didn't come because he was participating in the secular world's training. This time, his master just happened to be in seclusion to heal his injuries, so he didn't know about this matter at all. Ho ho, how rare, how rare. The dignified young sect master of the Thousand Blades sect can't even take out 300 spiritual jades, right? Today, I've really widened my horizons. No wonder your Thousand Blades sect is on the decline, and you still have the nerve to call it the revival of the Thousand Blades sect. If you can't even take out this little bit of spiritual jades, I advise you to quickly go back to the countryside and farm. If you rely on the heavens to make a living, you might even be able to become a small landlord. A burly man walked over and ridiculed them. Seeing this person, Ling Tianyou's expression darkened. This person was called Wei Yidao, and he was a well-known figure among the younger generation of the Tyrant Blade sect. Since ancient times, the Tyrant Blade sect and the Thousand Blades sect had endless grievances, and there were often conflicts between the two sects, so it was natural for the disciples of the two sects to view each other as enemies. In particular, the two of them had special identities, so they were at loggerheads. If an ordinary person came to ridicule him, with Ling Tianyou's temperament, he would basically ignore them. However, the other party was Wei Yidao. He could ignore the ridicule and ridicule of everyone except for Wei Yidao. Without saying anything, Ling Tianyou immediately threw out a big bag of spiritual jades. With everyone's eyesight, they could see at a glance that there were exactly 400 spiritual jades, not one more, and not one less. Another 100? What? Are you showing off? Wei Yidao still had a ridiculing expression on his face. 400 spiritual jades was indeed not a small amount in the outside world, and it was enough to suppress a large number of people. However, which of the people here was ordinary? Would those who could afford the admission ticket really care about this little bit of spiritual jades? Young sect master Ling, this is for two people? Marquis Yu understood Ling Tianyou's meaning. In order to repay his life-saving grace, Ling Tianyou had specially invited Lin Yi to Tai Shi Island this time. Naturally, he had also paid for the admission ticket. Otherwise, it would be too stingy. That's right, but I didn't expect it to become 300. Ling Tianyou could only smile bitterly. Other than this bag, he had also put some on the flying spiritual beasts, but it was not as much as 200. This time, he was really in a difficult position. He had properly repaid his debt of gratitude, but instead, he had become a joke, so that's how it is. Then it's a little troublesome. Marquis Yu pinched his chin somewhat awkwardly. This was not the first time Ling Tianyou had come here, and he could be considered an old acquaintance. Moreover, his relationship with the Thousand Blades faction had always been good. However, this was a different matter. He couldn't possibly deduct Ling Tianyou's 200 spiritual jades just because of this, right? Firstly, he didn't have the authority to do so. Secondly, there were so many pairs of eyes watching. Once this precedent was set, there would be no lack of trouble in the future. His friendship with Ling Tianyou had not reached that point yet. Chapter 5400. He and Ling Tianyou were destined to be archenemies from the moment they were born. Although Wei Yidao's talent and strength were definitely not bad, it was a pity that his opponent was Ling Tianyou. In front of a super genius like 1,000 Flying Blades, everything would be overshadowed, including Wei Yidao. In the past, he was suppressed by Ling Tianyou to the point where he couldn't even raise his head. Now that he had a rare opportunity, Wei Yidao naturally wouldn't let it go. As soon as he said this, the surrounding people also revealed mocking expressions, as if they were watching a good show. Some of them even cooperated and sneered. No matter where they stood, it was always a good thing to be able to see a super genius like Ling Tianyou embarrass himself. In any case, Wei Yidao was the one who stood out, so they were happy to add fuel to the fire. Ling Tianyou originally didn't want to waste his breath on Wei Yidao, but now that he had become the target of public criticism, especially in front of Lin Yi, he couldn't keep his face any longer. He said in a deep voice, "Wei Yidao, this isn't the Middle Island. Tai Snake Island doesn't have a rule that forbids disciples of immemorial sects from fighting in public. In other words, if you continue to talk nonsense, I won't be polite." "Really? Then let's see what happens." Wei Yidao's eyelids twitched. In terms of level, he was at the great perfection of Foundation establishment realm, so he was a head above Ling Tianyu. However, the problem was that the other party was an existence that defied common sense. He was very clear that it was impossible for him to block Ling Tianyu's 1,000 flying blades. However, this didn't mean that he was really afraid of Ling Tianyu. If there were only the two of them here, he might really be scared. However, there were so many outsiders here. If Ling Tianyu really attacked him in public, this matter would definitely be spread to the Middle Island. Even if Tai Snake Island didn't have a rule that forbids private fights, it would definitely infuriate the entire Tyrant's Blade sect. The 1,000 Blades sect was once powerful, but now it was just an ordinary sect. Its strength was almost on par with the Tyrant's Blade sect, and it might even be inferior. With the hundreds of years of old grudges between the two sects, if the new enmity of the chief disciple was added, there would definitely be a big fight. The 1,000 Blades sect couldn't bear the consequences. As the young master of the 1,000 Blades sect, Ling Tianyu shouldered the heavy responsibility of reviving the sect. Wei Yidao was very clear that he didn't have the courage. Do you really think I wouldn't dare? Ling Tianyu's killing intent surged. If it was in the past, he would indeed be a little overcautious. He believed that as long as he matured, he would definitely be able to revive the 1,000 Blades sect. There was no need to look for trouble for a moment of anger. However, these thoughts were thrown to the back of his mind after he saw Lin Yi. Lin Yi's appearance caused him to suddenly realize that there was always someone better out there, and he wasn't the only super genius in the world. If he continued to be afraid of the slightest thing, then he would be left behind by the others sooner or later, and the gap between them would only grow larger and larger. How could he talk about the great cause of rejuvenation? Then, all geniuses had high aspirations, especially for a super genius like Ling Tianyu. Once he made a decision, a person like Wei Yidao would be a dead man in his eyes. Seeing Ling Tianyu like this, Wei Yidao's heart couldn't help but thump. He was originally very sure that Ling Tianyu wouldn't dare to make a move against him in public, but now he really wasn't so sure. If this fellow Ling Tianyu really became ruthless, it would be very frightening. Young Master Ling, you can try. At this time, the old man standing beside Wei Yidao spoke. This person was called Lin Zhen, and he was one of the top 5 high-level elders in the Tyrant's Blade sect. His strength was at the late stage of the Gold Core realm. No matter how terrifying Ling Tianyu's flying 1,000 blades technique was, it was still not enough in front of a late-stage Gold Core realm expert like him. Ling Tianyu's position in the 1,000 Blades sect was far more important than Wei Yidao's position in the Tyrant's Blade sect. Once something happened to Ling Tianyu, the entire 1,000 Blades sect would go hysterical. At that time, they would definitely take revenge on the Tyrant's Blade sect. However, Lin Zhen couldn't sit by and watch Ling Tianyu bully Wei Yidao. If Ling Tianyu really wanted to make a move, he would have to go through him first. I've long heard that Elder Lin has comprehended the 5th layer of the Tyrant's Blade technique. Today, I can experience it for myself. Ling Tianyu grinned. If it was any other Foundation establishment realm expert facing a late-stage Gold Core realm expert, their legs would have already turned to jelly. However, he wasn't afraid at all. After all, his usual sparring partners were at this level, and he was already used to it. How dare you? Lin Zhen's face darkened. Being looked down upon by a junior at the peak of the late-stage Foundation establishment realm, even if the opponent was the famous flying 1,000 blades technique, and Ling Tianyu, this feeling was still very unpleasant and infuriating. Lin Zhen was about to make a move. At this time, Marquis Yu finally intervened and said, "Everyone, please wait a moment. Although my Thai Snake Island doesn't prohibit people from fighting each other, this place is not very suitable. After all, I am still waiting to collect the entrance spiritual jades. If you have any grudges, why don't you settle it after we enter? All right, since Steward Yu has spoken, I will definitely give you face. Lin Jun immediately made use of this opportunity to get out of the situation. He originally didn't want to make a move on Ling Tianyu. Moreover, Marquis Yu's position on this Thai Snake Island was equivalent to half a master. Not to mention him, an elder of the Tyrant's Blade sect. Even the head of the Tyrant's Blade sect had to show some respect. In that case, let's go in first. Ling Tianyu also took a step back. Go in. Hee. Young Master Ling, are you going to go in alone, or are you going to bring your friend along? You brought him from afar, but in the end, because of the lack of spiritual jades, he could only stand outside and wait. You are playing us like monkeys. It is really an honor to be your friend. Wei Yidao didn't forget to make sarcastic remarks. Ling Tianyu's expression was very ugly, but the other party was speaking the truth. Since things had come to this, he could only grit his teeth and say, Brother Lin, this time I didn't prepare well enough and let you see a joke. How about this? You go in alone this time. I will go back to the Thousand Blades sect to collect the spiritual jades and come back again. Although it was a little embarrassing, and he would inevitably be laughed at, this was the only way he could think of to deal with the situation. No need. Lin Yi swept his gaze across the crowd, and his gaze stopped on Wei Yidao, who was waiting to see a joke. He suddenly smiled and said, Brother Ling, you worry too much. I have already received your kind intentions. However, you should have heard that the thing I am least lacking in is spiritual jades. Let me handle this bit of spiritual jades. After saying this, Lin Yi pointed behind him. Only then did the crowd notice that there was a bag of spiritual jades behind him. Moreover, it looked like there was quite a lot of spiritual jades. For a moment, the crowd thought they were seeing things. Such a big bag of spiritual jades had been thrown on the ground, and they actually didn't notice it at all. There are 500 spiritual jades here, including the 400 from young Masterling. There is a total of 900 spiritual jades. Just enough for 3 people to enter. Marquis Yu glanced at Lin Yi and Ling Tianyu, then his gaze fell on Bing Wuqing. Chapter 5401. As soon as she said this, Ling Tianyu's expression became a little strange. Wei Yidao sneered. Entrance spiritual jades for 3 people? If I didn't hear wrongly, you are counting on Ling Tianyu to treat us, right? But I remember that most Archean sects only have 2 places. When did the Thousand Blades sect become so powerful? Really? Lin Yi turned to look at Ling Tianyu. Yes, the Thai Snake Island trial is different from the other trials in the Archean Alliance. It is never open to the public, and only a few people know about it. The number of places is limited, and it is a very strict one-to-one transfer system. Once your place is transferred, even if it is only temporary, you are not qualified to enter the Thai Snake Island trial before the place is returned. My Thousand Blades sect only has 2 places, me and my master, but this time my master is injured and in seclusion, so his place can be used by Brother Lin, but Ling Tianyu looked at Bing Wuqing awkwardly. From the beginning, Bing Wuqing's appearance was beyond his expectations. He didn't expect that Lin Yi would not treat Bing Wuqing as an outsider and bring her here. He didn't even feel embarrassed to stop her. With Ling Tianyu's status, it wouldn't be a big deal if it was just an extra 300 pieces of spirit jades. Although it wasn't a small amount, the Thousand Blades Sex Foundation wasn't something they couldn't afford. The key was the qualification to enter. There were only 2 people in the entire Thousand Blades sect, and they couldn't just let Lin Yi and Bing Wuqing enter, while Ling Tianyu, stood aside, right? In that case, I'll go back to Middle Island first. Bing Wuqing was not an unreasonable person. Even from Lin Yi's point of view, she couldn't let things get too awkward. Although the divine knowledge fruit was indeed coveted, she was now with Lin Yi, so she really didn't care too much about it. After all, a golden, nascent, gathering pill that Lin Yi casually gave her was comparable to a divine knowledge fruit. Thank you for your understanding, Brother Bing. Ling Tianyu was a little moved. As a super genius, he knew that it was extremely rare for Bing Wuqing to say such words. Even if she did it for Lin Yi's sake, he had no choice but to accept this favor. Ha! I say, young sect leader Ling, to be friends with you is really the greatest misfortune of my ancestors. They came all the way to Taishi Island, only to be chased back with their tails between their legs. Moreover, I heard that Bing Wuqing is now a nascent soul old monster. You really have a lot of face. Wei Yidao took the opportunity to sow discord. Although the Snow Sword faction and the Thousand Blades faction were not at odds with each other, they had never been on good terms with each other. To be honest, he and Lin Zhen were a little flustered when they saw Bing Wuqing and Ling Tianyu standing together. At this moment, it was only natural for them to stab each other in the back. Nascent soul old monsters had a special meaning in the small immemorial Jianghu. As the highest combat power of each sect, their every move represented not only themselves, but also the sect behind them. If Bing Wuqing was really rejected today, it would not only be her, but also the entire Snow Sword faction that would be humiliated. In the eyes of others, Bing Wuqing was simply fooled by Ling Tianyu. Ling Tianyu felt very apologetic in his heart. If he had known this earlier, he would have made things clear on the Middle Island. Then, he would not have fallen into such an awkward situation. Now, it was hard to get off the tiger. Being mocked by Wei Yidao and the others, Bing Wuqing could not sympathize with them even if she wanted to. In that case, Brother Lin and Brother Bing will go in this time. Anyway, there will be opportunities in the future. I will come again next time. Ling Tianyu finally gritted his teeth and said, this was the only way. Otherwise, if he really forced Bing Wuqing to go back, awkwardly, it would turn a good thing into a bad thing. Not only would they not end up well, but they would also become enemies. That's good too. Marquis Yu nodded. From his standpoint, it was impossible for him to open a back door for Ling Tianyu. As long as he did not break the rules of the Tai Snake Island trial, everything else did not matter. Io, sacrificing yourself for others. Young sect leader Ling has quite a high level of awareness. Wei Yidao gloated. Ling Tianyu did not say anything on the surface, but his expression was very gloomy. No one would be happy about this, especially when there was such a rival who kept mocking him. He was already considered to have a good temper if he could suppress his anger. If he continued to stay, people would continue to mock him. Ling Tianyu immediately wanted to leave, but he was stopped by Lin Yi. Brother Ling, you don't have to go. Huh. Ling Tianyu frowned and couldn't help but look at Bing Wuqing. Did Lin Yi mean to let Bing Wuqing go? Bing Wuqing was very tactful. She did not particularly care about this matter. She nodded at Lin Yi and turned to leave. In the end, she was stopped by Lin Yi. Brother Lin, you want to withdraw? That won't do. Ling Tianyu hurriedly interrupted. His main purpose this time was to repay Lin Yi for saving his life. If he made Lin Yi withdraw in the end, it would be pointless. No, Brother Ling, you are thinking too much. Lin Yi smiled and turned to Marquis Yu. Caretaker Yu, you see, the three of us have come all the way here. It is not appropriate to let anyone leave. There must be a solution to this matter, right? What do you mean? If you have something to say, you can say it directly. Marquis, you narrowed his eyes. Since Taishi Island has this trial, and since it is a trial that charges admission, there must be room to fight for it. Therefore, I want to buy an admission qualification, Linny said straightforwardly. By an admission qualification, everyone present was instantly stunned. Everyone knew that the admission qualification to Taishi Island could only be inherited or transferred. This was the first time that someone had openly proposed to buy an admission qualification. What kind of nonsense are you talking about? Do you really think that you can do anything with some spiritual jades? You even want to buy an admission qualification? Are you daydreaming? Wei Yidao immediately grinned coldly. Not only him, but all the other people present also had mocking expressions on their faces. The qualification to enter the Tai Snake Island for the trial was rare, which was why it was so precious. That was why people like them were a cut above the rest. If it could be bought so easily, what would be so precious about it? Everyone thought that Marquis you would reject it immediately and even teach this arrogant guy a lesson. In the end, they heard him say slowly, "That is very expensive. Very expensive." In other words, it could be bought. However, the price was very high. It would definitely not be as low as 300 spiritual jades. Understandable. Linny nodded. This was already within his expectations. Since Taishi Island's trial required an admission fee of spiritual jades, it meant that to a certain extent, it was similar to a merchant doing business. It could be regarded as a tourist attraction that charged admission fees. However, this tourist attraction was a little special. It was a strictly private membership system. Chapter 5402. That price is not something an average person can afford. Even a normal immemorial sect does not have the financial capability to do so. Are you sure you want to buy it? Marquis, you took a deep look at Lin E. If this matter was really successful, it would be an unprecedentedly big business. Tai Snake Island had not met such a big customer for over 100 years. However, he had never heard of the rumors of Lin E. In the past, he did not even know of this person's existence, so he was mostly suspicious of him. "Name your price," Lin E said indifferently. This tone shocked everyone for a moment. Then they all revealed a mocking expression. "Manager, you had already said it clearly. Even if a normal immemorial sect tried their best, they would not be able to afford the entry qualification. Otherwise, the trial of Tai Snake Island would not be as unknown as it was today. Even if the Azure Cloud sect of the Northern Island was one of the 10 small sects and clans, it would still be very strenuous. This guy actually behaved so casually. Wasn't he being too pretentious? Marquis, you also revealed a surprised expression. His already long and narrow eyes narrowed into slits. The corner of his mouth curled as he spat out 2 words 100 times. Hearing this, everyone present collectively sucked in a breath of cold air. 100 times naturally referred to 100 times the entry price. That would be a whole 30,000 spiritual jades. This was not the Heavenly Island. 30,000 spiritual jades was already an extremely high price. Just like what Marquis you had said, a normal immemorial sect would not be able to afford it. Everyone could not help but secretly rejoice. Fortunately, their entry qualification was passed down from their fathers. Otherwise, even if they saved up for a lifetime, they would not be able to afford it. Hearing this number, even Lin E could not help but reveal a surprised expression. 30,000 spiritual jades. This was really a little too high. 30,000 spiritual jades is not a small amount. It is really not something an ordinary person can afford. In fact, the number of trial qualifications that have been sold in the history of Tai Snake Island can be counted on one hand. Most of them obtained the qualification because of one reason or another. Then it was passed down to you from generation to generation. You should give up on this idea. Marquis Yu looked at Lin Yi's expression and knew that Lin Yi would definitely not be able to afford it. After all, if one's wealth was so strong, they would not need anything else. Just this alone would allow them to stand at the top of the small immemorial martial world. And he knew every single one of those people like the back of his hand. It was impossible that he had not heard of them. What did I say? A toad lusting after swan meat. That's 30,000 spiritual jades. You want to buy it just like that. Do you really think you are the god of fortune? Brother, you should just admit that you're unlucky to have a friend like young sect masterling. Why are you wasting everyone's time here? Wei Yidao still didn't forget to continue to provoke and add insult to injury. Lin Yi ignored him and continued to look at Marquis Yu. I want to know, why is this trial qualification worth 30,000 spiritual jades? Is it just because there is a chance to find the consciousness fruit? Although the consciousness fruit was not cheap, even if there was a ready-made one in front of them, it would definitely not be worth the astronomical price of 30,000 spiritual jades. At least in the small, immemorial martial world, no one would be willing to pay such a price. Moreover, it was not ready-made. There was only a small chance. Strictly speaking, even this chance was not big. Otherwise, the consciousness fruit would be everywhere. Of course, the consciousness fruit is the signature of Tai Snake Island's trial. However, it is not the only signature. Since Tai Snake Island dares to offer such a price, it is naturally worth it. We will definitely not let anyone suffer a loss. Of course, if we give the chance and we cannot grasp it, then it is not our problem. Marquis Yu swept his gaze across the crowd and said, as soon as he finished, everyone subconsciously looked at each other. They had come here for the consciousness fruit. It was true that Tai Snake Island was a unique place in the small, immemorial martial world. There were indeed some treasures of heaven and earth that could not be found in other places. However, those that could be compared to the consciousness fruit were few and far between. However, from what Marquis Yu had said, Tai Snake Island should have other extremely rare treasures of heaven and earth. Moreover, it was a treasure that was at least at the level of the consciousness fruit. What could it be? Marquis Yu obviously wanted to keep them in suspense. Everyone was extremely tempted by the suspense. In the past, they had come here to look for the consciousness fruit. It seemed that they had to change their thinking this time and investigate other things. In that case, let's buy one. Lin Yi's words immediately shocked a large group of people. Each of them had a strange look on their faces. 30,000 spiritual jades piled together was a huge box. Looking at his empty hands, where did he get 30,000 spiritual jades? It should be known that the small, immemorial martial world was not like the Heaven Stage Island. Because spiritual jades were very rare, the value of a single piece was far more valuable than on the Heaven Stage Island. Even if it was a large transaction with a sky-high price, it would at most be a box of spiritual jades. It was just that the box was a little bigger. Therefore, there was no such thing as a spiritual jade card. After all, there was not a need for it. Oh, where are the spiritual jades? Chapter 5403. Everyone immediately began to line up. Lin Yi, Ling Tianyu, and Bing Wuqing happened to be in front of Wei Yidao. Wei Yidao was shocked speechless by the 30,000 spiritual jades, but now he frowned again. What's so great about paying 30,000 spiritual jades? You can line up ahead of me. I say, why don't the three of you go in directly? This was a sarcastic remark, but Lin Yi glanced at him and turned to Marquis Yu. Caretaker you, can we go in directly? It doesn't matter if we pay a little more spiritual jades. Sure. Marquis Yu was very straightforward and directly opened the green passage for them. Seeing Lin Yi and the other two leave first, Wei Yidao's face turned green. Unfortunately, he didn't dare to say anything in front of Marquis Yu and could only endure it. After entering the trial ground, Ling Tianyu introduced to Lin Yi and Bing Wuqing the terrain of Tai Snake Island is clear at a glance. The snake's tail is the only entrance and exit. As long as you keep walking along the snake's body, you can finally reach the snake's head. However, there are very few people who can actually reach there. It's too difficult. Why? If it's just to go to the snake's head, can't we just go there by flying spirit beast? What's so difficult about that? Lin Yi asked curiously. Brother Lin, you don't know this, but the entire Tai Snake Island is enveloped by a very special primordial formation. It is said that it is very likely to be the protective formation of Tai Snake itself. Flying spirit beasts can't fly above it at all. Even if they force their way in, it is extremely dangerous. If flying spirit beasts can't do it, is it difficult to walk on the ground? Bing Wuqing asked. It's very difficult. There are dangers everywhere along the way. Spirit beasts and traps can take away the life of a golden core expert at any time. The trial on Tai Snake Island is not only the most secret trial in the immemorial underworld, but also the most dangerous one. Although I can't be compared to the two of you, logically speaking, my strength is not bad, right? Ling Tianyu asked. Not bad. Lin Yi and Bing Wuqing shook their heads at the same time. Putting aside his terrifying potential for growth, Ling Tianyu's current strength was by no means weak. With his cultivation at the peak of the late stage of foundation building, he was comparable to an ordinary early-stage gold elixir cultivator. In theory, he was strong enough to handle most of the trials in the immemorial Jianghu. Ling Tianyu smiled bitterly and said, Then you definitely can't imagine it. The last few times I came here, I would encounter dozens of dangers every time. It was my master who pulled me back from the edge of life and death. Now, I'm more familiar with this place and have some experience. That's why I'm slightly better now. So cruel. Even Lin Yi's eyelids couldn't help but twitch. He was well aware of Ling Tianyu's strength. He was able to escape from Xue Jianfeng, a newly advanced nascent soul old monster, twice with his cultivation of peak late foundation establishment. This was enough to show that this person was extraordinary. That's right, twice. The first time was when he was saved by Lin Yi in the immemorial Jianghu, and the second time was when everyone returned to the immemorial Jianghu. Although Ling Tianyu didn't say it in detail, it was impossible for Xue Jianfeng to let him go so easily. But he still returned to the Thousand Blades faction safely, which showed that this was no small matter. Such a ruthless person was actually almost scared to death by Tai Snake Island. It was really unexpected. Of course, with Brother Lin and Brother Bing's strength, this little danger is nothing. You just need to be a little more careful. Ling Tianyu shook his head and laughed. He didn't know exactly how strong Lin Yi was, but from Bing Wuqing's attitude, he was sure that Lin Yi was at least above an ordinary nascent soul old monster. Such a person could go unhindered in the entire immemorial Jianghu, let alone a mere Tai Snake Island. Let's talk about the spirit knowledge fruit. What does it look like, and what habits it has? You have to tell us. Lin Yi smiled and said, Although Marquis, you had just fooled everyone outside, it was still unknown how much of it was true and how much of it was fake. The people who came here would at most be more cautious. The main focus would definitely be on the consciousness fruit, and Lin Yi was no exception. Actually, I don't know what it looks like in reality because I've never seen it before. My understanding of the spirit knowledge fruit comes from ancient books and my master. It is said that the spirit knowledge fruit has a deep relationship with the Thai snake clan. There is a saying that it is a part of the Thai snake's body, and its appearance is very similar to a snake's gallbladder. In other words, the spirit knowledge fruit looks like a snake's gallbladder, Ling Tianyu explained. In that case, it's still quite recognizable. Linny nodded. The most annoying thing when looking for treasures of heaven and earth was the lack of recognition. At first glance, it looked no different from weeds. That was really a pain in the ass. That's true, but it's a pity that the spirit knowledge fruit is still very hard to find. Ling Tianyu smiled bitterly and spread his hands. I've been to this place 4 times, from the snake's tail to the snake's head countless times, but I still haven't found anything. You can imagine the rarity of the spirit knowledge fruit. Just now, didn't that manager you say that there is no time limit? As long as you want to, you can stay here and continue looking? If you come again, you have to pay the entrance spirit jade again. Why do you still want to go out? Bing Wuching interrupted and asked, That is indeed the rule, but not many people will do that. As for the reason, why don't the 2 of you take a closer look? Ling Tianyu kept them in suspense. Lin Yi and Bing Wuching looked at each other, and for the first time, they began to sense the surrounding environment. After a while, Bing Wuching frowned slightly. The concentration of spiritual energy in this place is lower than outside. That's strange. Logically speaking, the rarer the ancient trial ground, the higher the concentration of spiritual energy. Only then can it nourish all kinds of treasures of heaven and earth. Why is it that this place is even worse than an ordinary place? This is still the snake's tail. The closer one is to the snake's head, the lower the concentration of spiritual energy. When one reaches the snake's head, there is almost no spiritual energy at all. It's no different from the secular world, Ling Tianyu added. But even if the spiritual energy here is a little thin, it's not impossible if one has the heart to persevere, right? Bing Wuching was a little doubtful. In terms of the thinness of spiritual energy, no place could be compared to the secular world, which was known as the graveyard of spiritual energy. It was true that everyone's daily cultivation was inseparable from spiritual energy, but if one really had the heart to persevere, one could even persevere in the secular world until the end of time, let alone on Tai Snake Island. It's not just the spiritual energy here. Linny shook his head and sensed the surroundings. Apart from the spiritual energy, there is also an extremely faint, fishy smell in this place. I don't know what it is exactly, but if one stays here for a long time, it's very likely that one will be poisoned slowly. Am I right? Chapter 5404. Most of them only noticed it after staying here for a long time and showing symptoms of being poisoned. There are very few people like Brother Lin who can see through it with just a glance. Your perception is truly unparalleled. Ling Tianyu praised sincerely. This was the truth. Lin Yi's perception was outstanding, and now that he had transformed into a primordial spirit, it was even more acute. He could immediately see through anything strange around him. You flatter me. Lin Yi smiled faintly. How harmful is this snake smell? Bing Wuching asked. It's really not that harmful. After the symptoms of chronic poisoning appear, as long as you leave Tai Snake Island as soon as possible, the symptoms will disappear, Ling Tianyu said. What if you continue to stay here? Bing Wuching asked again. The symptoms will get worse and worse, and when it reaches a certain level, you will be finished. There is no antidote for this snake smell. It can only cure itself when the symptoms are still mild. In the past, some people didn't believe in it, and in the end, they all became victims of this Tai Snake Island. These are all examples. Ling Tianyu sighed. Speaking of which, since the probability of finding the spirit knowledge fruit is so small, why did you bring us here? Lin Yi changed the topic. He had spent 30,000 spiritual jades for this. Although this amount of spiritual jades was nothing to him, it was not something that could be casually thrown away. However, if they could really find the spirit knowledge fruit, then let alone 30,000 spiritual jades, even 100,000 spiritual jades would be absolutely worth it for Lin Yi. After all, it was the same spirit knowledge fruit, but its significance to him and to others was completely different. How could a profound ascending stage expert be compared to a foundation establishment stage expert? Ling Tianyu smiled bitterly. He had originally planned to use this opportunity to return a favor to Lin Yi. Who would have thought that things would develop like this? Lin Yi actually took out 30,000 spiritual jades on the spot to buy an admission ticket. In this way, if he couldn't find the divine knowledge fruit this time, forget about repaying the favor. In a way, it could be said that he had cheated Lin Yi, spending 30,000 spirit jades for nothing. How could this be justified? But now that things had come to this, it was too late to say anything. Ling Tianyu could only say, "Brother Lin, the spiritual knowledge fruit is indeed difficult to find. My master and I have thought of countless ways to find it, but it's not that we have no harvest at all." "I'm all ears." Lin Yi and Bing Wuqing's interest was piqued. "Although my master and I did not find the spiritual knowledge fruit, after spending so much time and effort on Taishi Island, we have already eliminated most of the places. There is only one place we have not been to," Ling Tianyu said in a low voice. "Elimination? In other words, if there is really a spiritual knowledge fruit in this place, that place has the highest possibility of finding it. Is this what you mean?" Lin Yi's eyes lit up. "Yes, of course. This is just my wishful thinking. It's hard to say how high the probability is. It's very likely that we will still rejoice in vain when we get there." Ling Tianyu deliberately gave Lin Yi and Bing Wuqing a warning shot. "Understood." Lin Yi and Bing Wuqing nodded in unison. Neither of them were the kind of people who were stupid towards rare treasures like the spiritual knowledge fruit. They had always held an attitude of, if we get it, then it's fate. They would not be too insistent on it. "Then, shall I bring you there?" Ling Tianyu glanced behind him. While they were talking, Wei Yidao and the others had already started to enter. For this kind of thing, the fewer the people, the better. Once there were too many people, and they had attracted so much attention just now, it would be troublesome if someone with ulterior motives followed them. The three of them quickly moved forward along the narrow and winding path. This place was full of danger. If it was someone else, they would definitely not dare to move so fast. However, their team not only had Ling Tianyu, who was very familiar with the way as a guide, but more importantly, they had Lin Yi and Bing Wuqing, two powerful existences who could be considered top-notch in the immemorial martial world. Therefore, they did not need to worry about this little bit of danger. However, very soon, Lin Yi felt that something was wrong. What's wrong? Seeing that Lin Yi had suddenly slowed down, Ling Tianyu and Bing Wuqing were stunned at the same time. "Don't you feel that it's a little strange?" Lin Yi asked. The two of them looked at each other, and then shook their heads at the same time. No, both of them were super geniuses, and their senses were far more sensitive than ordinary people. Ling Tianyu's level was indeed a little low, but Bing Wuqing was now an expert at the peak of the early nascent soul realm. If there was really any danger here, it was impossible that she would not be able to sense it at all. However, it was Lin Yi who said this. It was not surprising that Lin Yi could sense something that they could not sense. "I have a feeling that there's a knife on my back." Lin Yi looked around. His divine sense clearly told him that there were no other cultivators following them within a few miles, and there were no signs of any spirit beasts either. However, the feeling of being stared at by someone was very strong. Lin Yi's intuition had never been wrong, especially now that his primordial spirit had reached the mysterious ascension stage. Then what should we do? Ling Tianyu asked. He did not have the slightest doubt. After all, the other party's strength was much higher than his. Moreover, Lin Yi was not a person who spoke without thinking. He would not deliberately mystify things and make such a joke. Find it out and kill it. This was Bing Wuqing's attitude, and it was also her usual style, simple and neat. Not for the time being. This guy is not ordinary, and it's not easy to reverse track its position. Moreover, I can feel that it is not specifically staring at the three of us, looking at the extremely scattered posture of its divine sense. Maybe everyone who entered the Tai Snake Island for the trial is its target. Let's wait and see first. Once it makes any moves, it will definitely reveal its foxtail. Linny said, "Okay." Ling Tianyu did not have any objection, although Bing Wuqing advocated killing the other party immediately. Since Lin Yi had said so, he naturally would not disobey. The key was that he did not have the ability to do so. The three of them continued to move forward, inexplicably feeling a little more pressure than before. No matter where the other party came from, being able to stare at a yuanying stage-old monster like Bing Wuqing without anyone noticing was enough to prove that the other party was unfathomable. Fortunately, Lin Yi was standing beside them. Otherwise, the two of them would not be aware of it, just like the others. "Brother Lin, what do you think this guy's background is? Don't tell me he has been hiding in Tai Snake Island and plotting something big?" Ling Tianyu could not help but ask after holding back for a long time. When he thought that there was such a guy hiding in Tai Snake Island, he could not help but break into a cold sweat. Chapter 5405. It's hard to say, but one thing for sure is that this guy's deific consciousness is at a very high level. Lin Yi paused, looked at the two, and added, higher than the average nascent soul old monster. As soon as he said this, Ling Tianyu and Bing Wuqing immediately fell silent. Nascent soul old monsters were already at the top of the immemorial underworld, and this guy's deific consciousness was higher than the average nascent soul old monsters. Wouldn't that mean that he had the highest combat power in the immemorial underworld? This small Tai Snake Island actually had so many crouching tigers and hidden dragons. It was simply incredible. The three continued to move forward for nearly an hour. At this time, they were already deep in the hinterland of Tai Snake Island, and they had crossed a clear path. They were already in a very remote place at the edge, and even Lin Yi could hear the sound of waves crashing against the reefs. "We're here." Ling Tianyu stopped. Lin Yi and Bing Wuqing were stunned at the same time. In front of them was not the deep mountains and dense forests they had imagined, nor was it a dangerous place. Instead, it was so empty that it made them feel excited, because in front of them was the sea, and under their feet was a cliff that was dozens of feet high. "Here." Bing Wuqing frowned. This place was full of bare rocks, and everything could be seen at a glance. It didn't look like a place where deific consciousness fruits could grow at all. Lin Yi was also a little puzzled, but after sensing for a moment, he suddenly raised his eyebrows. "There's a cave under the cliff." "Brother Lin is wise." Ling Tianyu grinned, and then explained, "It was also by chance. The last time I came here with my master, we encountered an armored bone snake. It is one of the most ferocious and terrifying spirit beasts on Tai Snake Island, and its mature strength is close to that of a nascent soul old monster. Even my master could only run away if he was targeted by it, but that guy is so elusive that we couldn't get rid of it several times. Finally, we were forced to this position and had no choice but to jump into the sea. There were all kinds of ferocious and terrifying sea beasts in the vast sea of Heaven Stage Island, and it was the same in the immemorial underworld. Normally, no one would jump into the sea unless it was absolutely necessary, especially in a dangerous and remote place like Tie Snake Island. Of course, compared to the armored bone snake in front of them, they had no choice but to jump. And then Lin motioned for Ling Tianyu to continue. After that, we discovered that there was actually an extremely large cave underneath. The entrance was less than 15 zhang underwater. My master and I swam inside for a while, and when we entered, it was a completely different world. However, there was a strange and dangerous aura lingering inside. My master was injured by the armored bone snake, so he didn't dare to go too deep inside. He only stayed at the entrance for a while before retreating, Ling Tianyu said with a sigh. Interesting. Lin Yi's lips curled into a smile. This Tie Snake Island, from the snake's tail to the snake's head, not only me and my master, but also the other cultivators have been sifted countless times. If there really is a spiritual knowledge fruit, it would have been taken away long ago. Only that unknown cave is a blank area that everyone has missed. Ling Tianyu grinned excitedly. If it weren't for the fact that their strength was too low and they were frightened by the armored bone snake, Ling Tianyu and his master would have already sifted through the cave below. After all, it was related to the spiritual knowledge fruit, and anyone who came here would be tempted. Then what are you waiting for? Lin Yi glanced at the two of them and was about to take the lead to go down. Brother Lin, wait a moment. Ling Tianyu hurriedly stopped him. What? Brother Ling, do you have any other things to take note of? Lin Yi turned to look at him. No, with Brother Lin and Brother Bing's strength, there is nothing to be afraid of, even if there is a mountain of knives or a sea of fire down below. But Ling Tianyu paused and shook his head. I actually didn't plan to go down this time. Oh. Lin Yi and Bing Wuqing couldn't help but look at each other. According to what the other party said, the spiritual knowledge fruit was likely to be in this huge cave below. They had obviously come here, but they didn't plan to go down. What the hell was going on? As the saying went, it was hard to know what was in a man's heart. Although Lin Yi had saved Ling Tianyu's life, no one knew what the other party was planning. This time, the Tai Shi Island trial might really be to repay his kindness, or it might just be a trap. No one could say for sure. No matter how they looked at it, it was a bit abrupt for Ling Tianyu to retreat at this time. Please don't misunderstand. I don't have any intention of harming the two of you. Even if we take 10,000 steps back, with the strength of the two of you, do you think others can trick you? Ling Tianyu hurriedly clarified with a bitter smile. Brother Ling, don't worry, I believe you won't harm us. Lin Yi nodded. Frankly speaking, he didn't believe in Ling Tianyu's character, but purely believed in his and Bing Wuqing's strength. After all, no matter what kind of trap it was, if the other party really wanted to trick them, there must be a nascent soul old monster, and there must be a lot of nascent soul old monsters. Otherwise, only 2 or 3 nascent soul old monsters would be useless. In the small ancient Jianghu, the movement of any nascent soul old monster would attract attention. As for gathering more than 3 nascent soul old monsters at once, it was almost a fantasy. Unless the entire ancient alliance declared war on Lin Yi, it was impossible for a single Ling Tianyu to have such influence. What's more, even if there were so many nascent soul old monsters, as long as they came to Tai Shi Island, they couldn't escape Lin Yi's divine sense. Therefore, the possibility of Ling Tianyu setting a trap for them was very small. Thank you. Ling Tianyu was somewhat flattered by Lin Yi's trust, and then said, My purpose in coming to Tai Shi Island this time is actually different from others. I'm not here for the spiritual knowledge fruit, but to do 2 things. What two things? Linny asked. One is to bring you here, whether or not there are spiritual knowledge fruits in this huge cave below. This is a token of my sincerity and also a small repayment to Brother Lin for saving my life, Ling Tianyu said sincerely. Ling Tianyu said, sincerely. From the very beginning, he had never planned to go down with the two of them. It was not only because his strength was too low, but also because he wanted to avoid the awkwardness. If there were really spiritual knowledge fruits down there, and there were only one or two, what should he do? Of course, such thinking was a little groundless. After all, it was still unknown whether there were spiritual knowledge fruits down there or not. Worrying about dividing the spoils at this time, in the eyes of others, was really thinking too much. What about the second thing? Linny continued to ask. Chapter 5406. Lin Yi and Bing Wuqing still didn't know what the snake's head meant, but he had made up his mind to do so. If he hadn't been continuously stimulated by freaks like Lin Yi and Bing Wuqing, he wouldn't have taken such a risk. But now, Ling Tianyu was under great pressure. If he didn't push himself hard, then not only Lin Yi, but also Bing Wuqing and Xue Jianfeng would leave him behind forever. As a super genius of the Thousand Flying Blades sect, his pride was destined to never fall behind. Challenge the limit. Lin Yi took a deep look at Ling Tianyu. Although he didn't know the specific situation, he could roughly guess it from his eyes. Lin Yi immediately said, I understand, but it doesn't conflict with you going down with us. Even if it's to challenge the limit, we can wait until we come up. If we can really find the divine consciousness fruit, we can share it equally. If it's not enough, I'll compensate with spiritual jades. I appreciate Brother Lin's kindness, but I've made up my mind. Brother Lin, you don't have to persuade me anymore. We'll meet again. Ling Tianyu cupped his hands at Lin Yi and Bing Wuqing, and then turned to leave. After watching Ling Tianyu leave, Bing Wuqing suddenly said, It seems that this guy has been greatly stimulated. Excellent talent, strong will, and although not tactful, he's remarkable. If nothing goes wrong, he will become a great person in the future. Lin Yi said thoughtfully. He rarely evaluated others, and this was already an extremely high evaluation. Bing Wuqing was also a person with unlimited potential, but in the long run, in his opinion, it was really hard to say whether she could continue to surpass Ling Tianyu in the future. Of course, now that Bing Wuqing was Lin Yi's follower, Ling Tianyu couldn't compare with all kinds of cultivation resources. If he couldn't make up for the gap in this aspect, the gap in strength between them would only get bigger and bigger. Without saying anything more, the two immediately jumped into the sea and sneaked into the underground cave. Just as Ling Tianyu said, the entrance was less than half a mile away, and the inside suddenly became clear. After coming ashore, they were still about 10 feet from the top of the cave, and the environment was quite spacious. The most amazing thing was that this place was different from what he had imagined. It was actually not completely pitch black. Instead, it was suffused with a gentle green light. It was like a paradise in a fairy tale, enchanting and enchanting. This light, Bing Wuqing couldn't help but furrow her brows. Although the gentle green light around them gave off a magnificent feeling, it gave her a strange sense of danger. Her past experiences had taught her that the more beautiful something was, the more dangerous it was. It seems that this place is often covered by seawater. If I'm not wrong, this place will be completely flooded every time the tide rises. So we don't have much time left. Linny looked around and said. Bing Wuqing glanced at him. She didn't understand what he meant. Look at the glowing things clearly. They are some kind of tiny plankton living in the seawater. Their bodies emit green fluorescence. Look, not only are they everywhere on the ground, but even the top of the cave is covered with them. If it wasn't often covered by seawater, they wouldn't stay here for no reason, not to mention that they are all alive, Lin Yi explained. Yes. Bing Wuqing nodded and was secretly amazed. She had a whole new understanding of Lin Yi's insight. In terms of real strength, all the experts she had met in the past were far inferior to Lin Yi. Once they encountered a problem, they would basically go straight to the point and solve everything with their fists. There were very few people like Lin Yi who paid attention to details. I don't think this place is too big. We should be able to make a rough sweep outside before it gets dark. We can get out before the tide rises. Let's split up and make the best use of our time. Lin Yi decided to split up. After all, Bing Wuqing was different from his other lackeys. With her strength at the peak of the early nascent soul realm, she could handle any place in the immemorial underworld with ease. There was no need for her to stay by his side. As for the spirit knowledge fruit, Lin Yi believed that if Bing Wuqing really gained something, she wouldn't keep it for herself. He didn't trust her character, but he trusted her intelligence. If it were Xue Jianfeng, he would definitely do something stupid like keeping the spirit knowledge fruit for himself. But Bing Wuqing would never do it because she was a smart person. All right. Bing Wuqing didn't hesitate and immediately chose a direction to search. Lin Yi, on the other hand, chose the opposite direction. Relying on his divine senses that were far superior to ordinary people's, he moved at an extremely fast speed. At first glance, he looked like a shuttling shadow. This underground cave wasn't big, but it wasn't small either. If he didn't speed up, he wouldn't be able to finish searching before the tide rises. In this underground cave, apart from plankton that emitted green fluorescence, the most common thing was seaweed. Apart from that, there was almost no other vegetation, not to mention any large plants. So, at first glance, it seemed like he could see everything at a glance. However, this didn't mean that it was easy to find the spirit knowledge fruit. Through Ling Tianyou's description, although Lin Yi already knew what the spirit knowledge fruit looked like, he didn't know whether it was a tree fruit or simply growing on the ground. It was easy to find a tree fruit in this place, but if it grew on the ground and was covered by seaweed, it would be a little troublesome. Before this, Lin Yi quite agreed with Ling Tianyou's judgment and felt that the legendary spirit knowledge fruit was very likely to grow in this cave. But now he was a little hesitant. If his deduction was right, this cave was often flooded by seawater. Could it be that the spirit knowledge fruit could grow in seawater? In the minds of most people, including Lin Yi, treasures of heaven, and earth like the spirit knowledge fruit must grow in a primitive land with abundant spiritual qi. As for growing in seawater, the possibility was really slim. After all, seawater was not very compatible with the spiritual qi of heaven and earth. Once one was shrouded by seawater all year round, the spiritual qi conditions would not be much different from that of the secular world. What kind of treasures of heaven and earth could grow in such an environment? Of course, muttering was just muttering. After all, there were very few people who had actually seen the spirit knowledge fruit. Maybe the spirit knowledge fruit was so strange. After searching in a direction for a while, Lin Yi suddenly stopped halfway. It wasn't because he found the spirit knowledge fruit, but because his divine senses sensed that there were people not far ahead. And there was more than one person. You're tuning in to the Mystic Fist YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.